I'm just looking for places to sit. This is, that's Will's chair. Right in here.
She's kind of semi in here, but not so much.
That's why Kim gave him his. Even if they're random. Anybody else who wants to find the fact and just
That's exciting.
I think it's expensive to encourage them to add it early because that's a lot of money. It's not cheap to do
What case?
I just want to be on.
So they broke the rules. I mean, they got some. I know. Jackie, the secretary, she went to all of the rental agencies. She moved to rental agencies. And she told these the HOA rules to all renters. And you and everybody else.
specifically asking us dealt with it. It's like we want to know how to do it. So I gave you a see how it does. I called
This meeting of the Escambia County Board of Adjustment for November 14, 2018 is hereby called to order with 6 members present. We have a quorum. Will the clerk please swear in members of staff?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Members of the board, copies of staff's resumes have previously been provided and remain on file for reference. The board has previously recognized staff as an expert witness. Does anyone have any questions regarding their qualifications and abilities to offer expert testimony? Seeing none. The Board of Adjustment Meeting Package for November 14, 2018 with the Development Services staff's findings of fact has previously been provided to the board members. The Chair will now entertain a motion to accept the BOA meeting package into evidence.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Judy. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously. Do we have proof of publication?
Yes, sir.
And did the publication meet all legal requirements?
Yes, sir.
Chair will now entertain a motion to waive the reading of the legal advertisement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Judy. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously. Members of the board, have you reviewed the resume and transcript for the Board of Adjustment meeting held on October 17, 2018? Upon your review of the resume and transcript, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Seeing none, the chair will now entertain a motion regarding the hearing resume for the Board of Adjustment meeting held on October 17, 2018. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Judy. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously.
The Board of Adjustment, the BOA, hears administrative appeals, variances, and conditional use requests. These hearings are quasi-judicial in nature. Quasi-judicial hearings are like evidentiary hearings in a court of law, however less formal. All public testimony will be taken under oath, and anyone testifying before the BOA may be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits that the BOA considers are entered into evidence and made part of the record. The giving of opinion testimony will be limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence in the record. After hearing the testimony and arguments for and against the proposed action, and before making its decision, the BOA will consider the relevant testimony, the exhibits entered into evidence, and the applicable law. Because decisions of the BOA relating to variances, conditional uses, and extensions of development order for site plan approval are final, unless overturned by a court of competent jurisdiction, the county may issue development orders and permits for properties in accordance with the decisions of the BOA. However, if applicant requests the issuance of any such order or permit, and any such order or permit is issued, the applicant and not the county shall bear any risk that such decision may be set aside, the development order or permit may be revoked, or the development may be otherwise enjoined by the reviewing court. Any applicant for relief from a decision of the BOA for said actions, or any aggrieved party as defined by state law, may seek review of such decision by filing an appropriate pleading in a court of competent jurisdiction within 30 days of the BOA decision. The date of the BOA decision shall be the date the BOA voted at the conclusion of the hearing. Whenever the BOA denies an application, no new application for an identical action on the same parcel shall be accepted for consideration within a period of 180 days of the BOA decision. Any person aggrieved by a decision of the BOA relating to an appeal of an administrative decision may within 15 days thereafter apply to the circuit court for review. Each individual who wishes to address the board regarding a particular issue must complete a green request to speak form and submit it to the clerk of board. These forms are located on the table at the back of the commission chambers. We will not be allowed to speak until we receive one of these completed request to speak forms. We must have these completed forms for public record.
All written or oral communication outside of this hearing with members of the BOA regarding matters under review today are considered ex parte communications. Ex parte communications are presumed prejudicial under Florida law and must be disclosed as provided in Board of County Commission Resolution 96-13 before a decision by this board or any administrative appeal, variance, or conditional use request. The chair will ask, as each case is heard, that any board member who has been involved in any ex parte communication regarding the respective issue to please identify themselves and describe the communication. If there is no objection, we would like to address 3130 Barrancas Avenue first, since there are fewer people to address that.
Yes, sir. One additional bit of housekeeping. The appeal case, the Dollar General case, has been continued. We got a last-minute notice yesterday. Some of the folks involved had a health emergency and requested a continuance, and our legal staff signed off on that.
Do we have a motion?
We will be rescheduling.
So we have a motion to extend the continuance on the appeal.
So moved.
Motion by Bill.
Mr. Chairman, do we know about how long continues we're looking at? Since we're in the holiday season, I would think we would be looking probably after New Year.
Yes, sir, we are. We're actually looking to find a date. We can do a special meeting just for that one hearing. That's, right now, trying to juggle all those schedules, and we'll be getting with you in the following week with some possible dates.
Right, and we do concur with you, Mr. Godwin, that it'd be better if it's after the holidays, because it's hot. So hopefully, sometime in January. That's a long way, but the holidays are right upon us, and so we really want to be mindful of that as well. So that's going to be our purpose, but it's really going to be up to the legals to work those issues out.
Motion by Bill, second by Michael, to extend the appeal to a later date. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously. Again, then, without objection, we will move to 3130 Barrancas Avenue. Does staff have any problem with that?
No, sir.
Our first case then will be Conditional Use 2018-19, 3130 Barrancas Avenue. Board members, has there been any ex parte communication regarding this case? Seeing none, does anyone have knowledge or information obtained from a site visit or other sources?
I actually live in the area, so I drive by there every day.
Thank you. Does any board member intend to refrain from voting due to a voting conflict of interest? Seeing none. Would the individuals who are party to this item please come to the podium, identify yourself at this time by stating your name and address for the record, and be sworn in by the clerk. Derek Frazier.
Derek Frazier, 3980 Eaton Drive. I will be the vendor at the said winery.
And Derek, wait. Were you provided with a copy of staff's findings of fact?
Yes, sir.
And you understand that all the criteria must be met?
Yes, sir.
Does the board have any questions of the applicant? I'd like to know if the staff has ruled approval of this. So the chair will now entertain a motion to accept staff's findings of fact unless staff has any comment.
Just didn't know if you had any other speakers on this particular item.
We do not.
I signed up.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. You're Larry.
Larry Downs Jr.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Come forward then and be sworn in.
You swear me in.
I am. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak on this real quick. I understand the zoning for this type of operation allows it, and y'all have to decide whether or not y'all are going to grant these people their property rights. And in order to, so that they can operate a business. And I'm one of the citizens in this county who believes in property rights. And I'm urging y'all to approve this request so that these people can move forward with their endeavors of trying to make a living. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does the board have any questions to the speaker? Seeing none, Chair will entertain for a motion.
Make a motion, we agree with staff's findings of fact and then approve the conditional use.
We have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Judy. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously. The next case is Conditional Use 2018-18, Escambia County, 16400 block, Perdido Key Drive. Board members, has there been any ex parte communication regarding this case?
I'm not sure if it's ex parte. I live in the area, I'm on the chamber board. We're well aware of this property. The last time I was on the property was after Ivan, when the condo was there and destroyed. I would ask the lawyer whether this precludes me from voting. What did you say?
He's questioning, having lived out there, if it's okay if he votes on the proposal.
What did she say?
Yes, you can vote. Does anyone have knowledge or information obtained from a site visit or other sources?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I did watch the county commission debate on this issue when it was brought before them.
I don't see that as any conflict. No conflict, thank you, sir. Does any board member intend to refrain from voting due to a voting conflict of interest? Would the presenters who are a party to this item identify yourself? And I believe you may have already been sworn.
Yes, I was. Okay, so what we've got here is conditional use case 2018-18. This is on Perdido Key Drive. On last month, October 18, 2018, at their regular BCC meeting, the BCC voted 3-1 to direct staff to begin the procedure. To direct staff to begin to procure the planning aspect moving forward and utilize the funds that are in the Perdido Key Beach Acquisition Project of $50,000. First step in moving forward with access on this piece of property is this conditional use. This is seeking approval of the land use. The zoning is HDR, Perdido Key, and under the conditional uses, one of which is public park, and that's why we're here. At this point, we're going to go to Mr. Day is going to present essentially the applicant's side of things, and then I'll do the staff findings. As always, it's a little awkward, unusual when the county is the applicant, but we will proceed as we normally do.
Thank you. My name is Tim Day. I'm the Senior Manager for the Natural Resource Management Department of Escambia County. Just wanted to give you a very brief history of this parcel. The county, in cooperation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, received what's called a Section 6 grant. And the stated purpose for that grant was both beach mounts preservation and public access. The county moved forward with the grant, received it, and with help from a third party called Trust for Public Lands, negotiated a sale of the property initially from Sundown to Trust for Public Lands, and had a simultaneous closing with the county in February of 2014. And so that's how the county came to acquire this property. It sat in its pseudo-native state since that time. About 6 months ago, there was public discussions at the board. The board met several times and discussed it, ultimately resulting in board direction in October of this year for us to go ahead and start the process to develop public access on the site.
And I would like to, for the record, this is not part of the backup. So that the record can be clean, we would like to ask the board to accept the, to take in the motion from the October 18th board meeting, so that the record can be clean with those, with that additional information from that BCC meeting. It's a lot of information, but it's not the backup. But for the record, we want that to be included, so that the record can be clean, straightforward. That's the motion. Yes.
Chair seeks a motion from the board.
So we need to make a motion to accept the VOCC as evidence? Okay, I make them, so moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Judy and a second by Walker. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, point of order. We rise to object to the introduction of the BCC minutes background material not provided to the public prior to this hearing, not provided to you prior to this hearing, and at this point, we have no idea what we're talking about. So we would rise to object.
I represent Marseille Condominium, George R. Meade. I join in that objection independently.
Okay, we have a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman, point of order.
Yeah.
That was a public meeting, sir. Open to the public, televised to the public. I think you should go ahead and do what you need to do on it.
Absolutely. Identities on the record. Speak.
Yes, please. If you will, identify yourselves.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Will Dunaway. I represent Seafarer Condominium, law firm at Clark Partington, rising to object to the introduction of the material.
Thank you, sir.
George R. Meade of Memorial Westmore, representing Marseille Condominium, and I'm joining in that objection.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Randy Cudd. I am representing the citizens of Escambia County.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if you did want to proceed in that direction, I have copies here that were printed from the public record, from that public meeting that was broadcast.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second. Yes.
I am a member of the public, and I object also that it wasn't provided ahead of time. Jacqueline Rogers, thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Downs Jr., and I'm a member of the public, and I was at the public meeting with the Board of County Commissioners that was advertised to us. And all of this information has been available to the public since day one. So I am for you approving this record.
Yes, please.
Melissa Pino, 413 Southeast Boblets. I don't pretend to have any legal expertise, but it seems to me common sense that public documents that have been available publicly and Florida Sunshine with videos streamed, both live and archived, common sense would dictate that the various divisions of Escambia County government should be able to pass documents back and forth freely.
Yes, sir.
My name is Michael McCormick. I also reside in the county. Just wanted to bring to your attention that the meeting minutes from that meeting from the POCC are available online at the myescambia.com site. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, I have a question. If we are to accept these, is there not a way that we can just review them? The board review them? I did not see the meeting, nor did I read the transcript. I'd just like to see what it has to say briefly.
Will that be included in staff's presentation?
I read off the motion that was approved.
If you want a copy of, we can. It's just a one-page motion. We could make a copy for you. That's all. Since it was brought up by Mr. Godwin, if you want to see if the board
Yeah,
wants to accept
I would
that
make
as
a
evidence.
motion to provide a copy to the board to review briefly. I do believe it was public record for those that were interested could participate, review, what have you. We get a package of information to review that wasn't in the package, and I'd like to see a copy of it if we're going to accept it.
Okay, I don't think that we need a motion to do that. We have a motion on the floor, but you can request that, and we'll wait to get a copy if that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, another housekeeping matter, we've had a number of people who've come up and made comments on this issue, which is to me kind of like a public forum rather than accepting sworn testimony. And I just would think that to make the record complete, that all the speakers would be sworn. That would be my just suggestion.
I think you're correct.
I was already sworn.
Without objection, those who just spoke, other than the attorneys, which are on record, they do not have to be sworn. If you'll come and state your name and address and be sworn. And you can all come at the same time.
Melissa Pino, 413 Southeast Boblets. I don't have to repeat it, just be sworn, right?
Yes.
Just everybody say their name and then I'll do it.
Randy Coon, 11151 Gulf Beach Highway.
Mike McCormick, 635 Ashford Road, Cantonment.
Timothy Smith, 310 West Sunset Avenue, Pensacola, Florida.
Michael Bearden, 11716 Chanticleer Court, Pensacola.
Tracy McAdams, 1620 Bush Street.
Dan Clark, 12140 Havberg Drive, Pensacola, Florida.
Jacqueline Rogers, 1420 Ridgeway, Cantonment.
Kevin Wade, 413 Southeast Boblets.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Michael Bearden, point of order. If the lawyers are going to be testifying, shouldn't they be sworn in? Excuse me, I have a question. If someone has ceded minutes to another for speaking purposes, do they need to be sworn in as well?
Yes.
They'll get sworn in as they call. Sworn in.
They won't be called up.
And Mr. Chairman, well, for the audience, we are going to have a point for the public to speak right now. We're trying to get into the case itself.
Okay, we still have a motion on the floor. Did you get the document you were seeking?
Not yet.
You did not?
I did not. I think we have to make a motion to accept those documents.
Okay, we have that motion is on the floor. We have a motion, we have a second to accept it. Is there any further discussion on it? Those in favor of accepting it, please raise your right hand. It's accepted.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one thought. Since we are discussing this, it would seem only fair that the attorneys who are representing parties opposed should have the right at least to make a statement or present argument on this matter.
Would y'all like to do that?
Of course they would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Will Dunaway, representing Seafair, law firm Clark Partington. We discussed this with staff, and in order to make this proceeding this morning run orderly and in accordance with your board procedures, we agreed that staff would make their presentation. Again, because the county is also the applicant, it's our understanding that Mr. Homer is representing staff, and then Mr. Day is representing the applicant. We will then have the opportunity to cross if necessary, and then after the presentation of all evidence from staff's report, the hearing of information from the audience, then we would make a closing. If that pleases the board, we're prepared to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And you, sir?
That procedure is what I would have expected and certainly is agreeable.
Thank you, sir. Staff's presentation, please.
Yes, sir. Once again, this is Conditional Use 2018-18. A conditional use request to allow a public park in HDR zoning. This is our location map. This is the 500-foot radius map showing the zoning on site is HDR PK. Our future land use on site is mixed use PK. This is the 2016 aerial map of the site. This is the critical habitat map shown over the aerial. This is the site plan that was provided. Public hearing sign. This is looking south to the entrance. This is again looking south and further to the west. This is looking into the site. Once again, looking into the site. Go back to the site plan, please. All right, as to the relevant criteria for conditional use. For the first criterion relating to general compatibility, the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding properties, and that use is encouraged in the county's 2030 comprehensive plan. Policies within that plan call for the county to maintain county-owned shoreline or open space access sites and provide adequate parking facilities for each site. In addition, the plan calls for the county to seek all available federal and state financial assistance to increase public access to the shoreline. Escambia County will continue to seek opportunities to enhance the public access to water or waterways. This proposed access meets those policies. Criterion B, facilities. The county will provide and maintain any facilities and services required for this project through conditions imposed in the site plan review process. All access points will be constructed and maintained as ADA compliant. Next criterion, dealing with circulation. Access to the parcel will be via a connection to Perdido Key Drive. Parking will be provided as proposed, along with any modifications imposed through site plan review. Environmental constraints will limit the number of available area for parking surface. Next criteria, nuisance and hazards. Because this is proposed as a passive recreation site, the intensity of use and effects on surrounding properties will be limited. Solid waste. The county will provide and maintain solid waste service in the same manner as with the other public beach access sites on Perdido Key. Screening and buffering. Screening and buffering for the proposed use will be limited by the environmental constraints on site. The passive recreation use and limited scope will alleviate buffering needs. Signs and lighting. Informational and directional signage will be provided as necessary, and no lighting is proposed. Site characteristics. Parcel size and topography are appropriate for the use as proposed. Site constraints will limit the proposed use to half of the previously developed footprint on the parcel. Use requirements. There are no additional ones specifically to this conditional use, but additional requirements regarding access and environmental issues may be imposed during site plan review. Staff findings. Staff finds the proposed use does meet all of the required criteria and approval is recommended. If approved, the plan will be submitted to the Development Review Committee for site plan review. And that concludes staff's findings.
Thank you, sir. Does the board have any questions of staff at this time? We have a number of speakers. We will ask you to hold your comments to 3 minutes. And if you will, when you step to the podium to be sworn in, if you've already been sworn in, just say that. Give your name and address again. Timothy Sal, is that correct? Timothy, you're giving your time to Melissa Pino?
That's correct.
Okay, Melissa. And I believe you've already been sworn.
I have, thank you, Melissa Pino, 413 Southeast Boglets. As you just heard, the criteria for this are so cut and dry. Actually, this whole process should have been cut and dried from the very beginning. From clear back in the day when Commissioner Robertson made the motion to purchase this land with Escambia taxpayer citizen dollars, in part, 26% of it, so the public could use that beach. When it sat there for 4 years, the situation was cut and dried. We had a commissioner that didn't move it forward, unbeknownst to the rest of the BOCC. The anger of the rest of the BOCC, once they found out that this parcel had never been open to the public for its intended use, is very cut and dry for anyone who has watched those meetings. The deed is cut and dry, the grant is cut and dry, the HPC is cut and dry, zoning is cut and dry if we get the conditional use, which should be cut and dry. And then, as you've seen in the motion that was made to allocate funding on the 18th, that too is very cut and dry. The BOCC, with the exception of one member, knows what needs to happen with this parcel. Enter the smoke and mirrors. And I cannot tell you how disconcerting it has been as a citizen to watch this process get continually dragged out with rhetorical smoke and mirrors and excuses of every nature trying to stop the public from being on that land because the adjacent condo owners don't want them there. That's it. That's the only reason for it. Now, yes, there's the potential of a lawsuit, however frivolous it may end up being, but the county can't proceed on the fear of getting sued from doing the right thing in a very cut and dry situation. Now, it's not just the people in this room, and you may be surprised at how many showed up and how organized and concerted we are in this effort. Believe me, this is just one step of the way. We've been fighting for this for months. And it's ridiculous we've even had to, but we'll continue to fight as long as we have to. And if we've got to take it to the courts, we will too. So far, we haven't needed any lawyers. We've been pretty successful as citizens. There was just a referendum that passed. 80% of Escambia County voters have an interest in public beaches. I mean, that's pretty astonishing, right? Particularly considering how confusing the wording of that referendum was, that people were able to battle through to an understanding that Grover Robinson's combined efforts with Save Pensacola Beach resulted in an outpouring. And everybody in this room, this is not the limit of everybody who is watching this meeting today. All of Escambia County, anyone who cares about beach access is watching this feed live right now on Facebook. It will be archived. People care. So there's going to be a lot of people that come up here and tell you that they don't want this. Again, I'm no lawyer, but I don't like it is not a zoning criteria as far as I understand. So please, just move this forward. It's cut and dried, and then whatever is going to play out afterwards, we'll deal with that after it comes. Thank you.
Thank you. Comment, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd have some cross-examination from Ms. Pino. Ms. Pino, you don't live on Perdido Key, do you?
No.
You heard that staff report indicated that this came up 6 months ago, is that correct?
Yes.
You were part of that, bringing that forward, were you not?
Not 6 months ago, no.
You have been involved in the campaign against Commissioner Underhill, is that correct?
What's that got to do with
Really? What's that got to do with anything?
She's not
Point of order here.
Objection. Trial.
Objection. Point of order here. This isn't a courthouse.
No, yeah.
Why is a lawyer allowed to
Cross-examine.
cross-examine a person making statements here?
Correct.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman, you know from your board procedures that all testimony that is given before the board under oath.
Attorney's not going to let them
Mr. Chairman, you know, as the board knows and your attorney knows, that all testimony that is given before this board is subject to being under sworn testimony, which Ms. Pino's was, and is subject to cross-examination.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'd just like to say that I'm not going to answer any questions under cross-examination from anybody other than county staff or the zoning board today without my own legal present.
Correct.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The motion before you has to do with conditional use. Hasn't got anything to do with Commissioner Underhill or the election. I believe the attorney is out of order.
For the record, state your name, sir.
Randy Good,
Thank you.
11151 Gulf Beach Highway.
Thank you, sir. Well, we cannot force the speaker to address the attorney. He does have the right to cross-examine. And, but if you feel that you did not want to address that, then that's certainly your prerogative.
Yes, I'm not going to answer any questions from an attorney without my own attorney present. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has or that county staff has.
Yes, thank you.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I have a point of order as well. I object to the inability to cross-examine. I also have certain cross-examination questions for this witness, specifically relating to the HCP, which she testified to, which I don't think is proper given the record before the board. Under the circumstances, if she is unwilling to entertain cross-examination, I would ask that her testimony be stricken from the record.
Point of order real quick.
Can I interject real quick? I think we need to bring up each speaker one at a time. So we've all got 3 minutes to speak, and continuing to have people come up every time we've got something to say is not, we don't need to allow that. So I know that you filled out a sheet to come and speak in a little bit, and so
I agree 100%. Can we hold the attorneys down until we get to speak?
The attorneys are able to cross-examine, as we stated earlier in our procedures and how we run the meetings.
Well, are we the people able to cross-examine the attorneys?
No.
No, because you're not representing the other side of this.
I'm representing the citizens
No.
of my community.
That's why you're allowed to have 3 minutes to come up and speak.
Aren't we allowed to represent ourselves as our own counsel? Just wondering. I mean, I think that's in the Constitution.
You're given 3 minutes to come up and speak. So.
Thank you. But I will answer their questions if they want to ask me something.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I hope they do.
There is one fault that I had if the opposing counsel isn't allowed, it would appear to me that if the opposing counsel is not allowed to cross-examine, that and therein lies a basis for an appeal to the circuit court, because at that point in time, they have been denied a due process opportunity. So even though I would just remark or observe, to me anyway, even though a person may not especially want to answer questions, the alternative to that is potentially that this matter will not be settled here and will wind up in an appeal for which, and potentially may have to start all over again or take some other course. So that's neither advising anyone what to say or when to say or how to say. It's simply me observing that there are certain due process requirements, and it would, if everyone wants to have a full and fair hearing, the opportunity for cross-examination has to be afforded. Now, as I said, but that's simply an observation. It's not legal advice by any stretch.
So we have already advised counsel that they have the right to cross-examine. But by the same token, the speaker has the right to not answer as the speaker is not represented by counsel. But that doesn't mean that other speakers will be.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
In the process of being cross-examined, does the attorney for your board become active with whether a question is actually germane to the item on the agenda?
Yes.
It's at the board's discretion to make those determinations. I'm not here to object to questioning from a party to the case.
The county's the applicant.
If I plead the fifth on particular questions, but allow the cross-examination, as we're calling it, is that going to impede
That is your prerogative.
impede the process? I mean, legally, if specifically I plead the fifth on questions that I don't feel are germane to this item, will that then produce the result of this possibly having to go to a circuit court?
Potentially, but it is your prerogative. We can't compel you to testify.
Okay, I'll go ahead and then I'm just going to plead the fifth on questions that I don't think are germane to this line item on the agenda.
Very good. Counselor?
Ms. Fino, you stated in your direct testimony that this was an issue that the property had set for 4 years and that nothing had happened. Were you involved in that process during those 4 years?
No.
When did you become involved in this process?
I don't recall the exact date. I believe it was approximately 3 months ago, maybe 4. It was not at the time that the board discussed it back in spring of this year.
And are you familiar with all of the criteria that is relevant today for conditional use?
Yes.
And do you have anything other to offer? Do you have anything to offer on those criteria other than what staff has presented?
No.
You stated that the deed and the grant were clear. With regards to the grant, are you aware of the specifics of that grant and what is required prior to moving forward with this property?
Yes.
And what specifically is that?
I'm going to refer to the grant itself. Anyone can look it up and read it. Not in its entirety, but I do know that 2 portions of it, 3 portions of it, are an ADA compliant walkover, ADA compliant restroom facilities, and a parking lot, but that may not be all of the things needed to move forward.
In the document that was submitted by staff over the objection regarding the minutes of the October 18 hearing, where the Board of County Commissioners directed staff to proceed with this process, you were listed as a speaker, is that correct?
Please repeat the question.
On the minutes of October 18 of 2018, which were submitted as evidence earlier over objection, you were listed as a speaker at that hearing, is that correct?
I believe so.
And did you advocate for this moving forward in this particular way at that hearing?
What do the words "in this particular way" mean?
The conditional use request that is before this board.
I was an advocate of getting all necessary steps, putting it through the proper channels, yes.
So you were not particularly advocating for one way or the other, just that it be open for public access?
I was advocating for all of the necessary legal steps to be pursued to open it, yes.
And were those steps directed by the BCC at that hearing? That is, what steps ought to be taken?
Conditional use was discussed by the BOCC, and per my recollection, and I don't have an edict memory, the BOCC discussed conditional use with staff, and the general sense was that it would be a good idea to pursue.
And that was what that direction was from the 3-1 vote, correct?
Which 3-1? The October 18th?
Correct.
I don't recall that the conditional use was part of that motion. I simply can't remember.
In fact, the recommendation was that the board direct staff to develop public access utilizing cluster or expanded access, correct?
I don't remember.
Was there any discussion about the effort to rezone the property, given the fact that it had been purchased 4 years prior for beach mouse habitat?
I don't remember.
Do you recall those who spoke in opposition to the motion on October the 18th?
Because I'm not crystal clear, I'm going to say I don't remember. There were a lot of meetings, and I don't want to make a mistake.
Did Mr. Randy Crud speak in opposition?
C-U-D-D, not crud.
Did Mr. Randy C-U-D-D speak in opposition to the application?
In opposition?
Correct.
To which application?
Did he speak in opposition to the board moving forward with the action that it took on October the 18th?
No.
Did Wilson Robinson?
I believe you mean Robertson.
Did Wilson Robertson speak in opposition to?
In opposition to moving forward?
Correct.
No.
Did Scott Trotter?
I don't remember.
Was Mr. Trotter at the time running for commission, a seat on the commission?
Not germane, because I don't remember whether he spoke.
Objection.
Mr. Trotter is listed as a speaker on the minutes that were presented and accepted into evidence over objection. Do you recall whether he spoke in opposition or in favor?
I don't recall whether he spoke at that meeting. Are you saying that he did speak at the meeting, that it's in the minutes?
That's what the minutes reflect as I'm reading.
I don't recall his presentation. There have been many meetings at which many people spoke, so I'm not feigning lack of memory on this. I don't remember.
How many additional meetings took place with regards to this public access in the last 4 months?
Public meetings?
Correct.
Are you including public forum with that?
Correct.
I couldn't say the specific number.
More than 4?
I don't know, it might be 4.
Chairman, can I interject something here? Why are we asking a citizen questions that he needs to direct to the staff if we want to cut information? I mean, we are taking one person's answers to questions as a citizen. Shouldn't he be asking those questions to the staff? I mean, her opinion of whether or not someone spoke and whether or not it was in opposition or not, according to her opinion, as to whether she viewed that person's testimony as being for or against something, is just that, her opinion. I feel it irrelevant.
In
If that
addition,
person's
I also
here-
like to say that many of these questions could be black and white addressed by referencing the minutes, which I don't have at hand.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, I've got a handheld mic, so everybody doesn't have to buddy up on that one if you don't mind, man.
We're neighbors.
We're actually friends, just not right now.
Ms. Rigby, I'll withdraw that last question.
Thank you, and I think Ms. Rigby's comments are germane, and maybe some of your thoughts and questions might better be directed to the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I'll also do that. Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Yes, sir.
I've got a question for the attorney. Sir, I have a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You stated you represent Seafarer,
That's correct, the adjacent property.
the adjacent property. Wasn't there some kind of a conflict with the commissioner about selling you the property? Didn't that come out in a BC County Commission meeting?
I'll bring it up.
The information, I'd be interested in, Mr. Chalmers, I'd be interested in your insight into that, because it'd be relevant and germane, I think, to the board and whether.
Well, asking the person questions about how people talked is irrelevant. You're talking, to me, we're talking about beach access on a property. I think it's totally relevant if your condominium was going to buy the property, and that's the reason you're objecting.
Well, absolutely, Mr. Sunquist. Conflicts of interest and those positions that people take, both publicly who advocate and those who send attorneys to represent them, are certainly, absolutely germane and relevant. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Seafarer opposes this property being used in the manner that it is being used. Seafarer has been an advocate and a partner with the county for many years to maintain this property for the purpose it was bought for, Perdido beach mouse habitat. And that is what we are advocating and moving forward to. Part of the inquiry that I was attempting to do with Ms. Pino was to point out also biases. Again, as the record is clear, the evidence has come out. 4 years this property has been in the planning process and has been utilized as beach mouse habitat. That's on record and with the Fish and Wildlife Refuge. With the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. A few months ago, in the heat of a campaign, this issue became a campaign issue and now is before you. And as you have seen already, it is very clearly a political issue, even though the politics and the campaigning and the election is now over. This is very much a political issue, and it's being put to you in that political manner when it need not have been, and which I will address at the end. But yes, sir, Mr. Sundquist, personal positions and the information behind those personal positions are very, very relevant. And I thank you for bringing that up, and I thank you for letting me comment on the position of my client, the Seafarer, which has always been clear. And we have been partnering with the county for many, many years
to maintain this as beach mouse habitat as it was purchased. Thank you.
Point of order, it was purchased for two things. 4 times now, he said it was only purchased for one. It was purchased for 2 purposes.
If you want to speak, we're going to have you fill out a form and come up with.
Call on you.
Mr. Chairman, I have questions for the witness.
Yes, and we'll call on you if you sign the speaker card. Thank you.
May I proceed? Yes. Thank you. My name is George Mead. I'm representing Marseille, which is across Crab Trap from the parcel in question, just for reference purposes. You mentioned, and the point of my questioning is to address, you said the HCP was cut and dry, and I believe you responded to Mr. O'Donnell's question that the grant was cut and dry. Are you referring to the same thing, the Habitat Conservation Program?
I'm not referring to the same thing. They're two separate things. The HCP is the Habitat Conservation Plan that governs conservation lands in Perdido Key for various reasons, including the beach mouse. The grant I was referencing is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant that paid for 74%, I believe, approximately, of this project,
You're talking
the
about
acquisition.
the Section 6 fund that was referred to.
I'm not clear whether it's Section 6, no.
That's fine. Can you offer the board any information with regard to the relationship and restrictions pertaining to the Habitat Conservation Plan as they relate to the uses of property purchased with Section 6 funding?
The county has fantastic experts on that subject, and they've already been advised by those experts. They don't need having me reinforce it.
Chairman, can I ask a question? Is she an expert witness?
No.
I'm just clarifying because she
I just wanted
said.
to confirm that she wasn't an expert witness, and therefore her testimony on that subject would be her opinion only.
I understand that. That's why I'm clarifying the record, because she testified to it. So to be clear, you don't have anything specific to offer regarding the HCP itself, its compatibility with Section 6, or anything relating to that?
I have nothing further other than the specifics that county staff has already provided the BOCC and this board with.
Very good. And then you also referenced funding for the study. Are you referring to the engineering study funding on feasibility that was funded at the 18th meeting?
No.
Or what were you referring to?
I was referring to the funding for the acquisition of the property, which was partially U.S. Fish and Wildlife grant and partially Escambia taxpayer money.
Are you aware that the BCC recently funded engineering study with regard to the feasibility and limits of the development of this parcel?
There's some question as to exactly whether that $50K allocation is actually going to cover the full cost of the design, but yes, I'm aware of the $50,000 allocation for it, and that it came out of specifically the Perdido Key Beach acquisition project.
And that study has not been provided or even prepared yet?
I'm unclear as to the timeline.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Board, any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, then we will call our next speaker. Remember to keep it to 3 minutes. Do you have the buzzer, sir? Okay. And in many cases, if you're not stating an additional fact that has already been stated, just say you concur with Speaker so-and-so. Jacqueline Rogers.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, my name is Jacqueline Rogers, 1420 Ridgeway, and I have been previously sworn in.
Thank you.
I want to talk to a couple of things here. With 3 minutes, I'm going to talk pretty quickly, but the staff said that they, actually, in the Land Development Code in Section 2-6.14 for conditional uses, it says if more than one conditional use is proposed, the conditions should be addressed for each use. You're aware that this is going to be used for both conservation and recreational use. It is not going to be used for HDR, high-density residential. And I did not see any of the conservation use addressed in here. I also thought this is not an appropriate zoning, and there should have been a rezoning and a change of the future land use to conservation. In fact, I think the board should direct the county to change the future land use on all their conservation lands to conservation and not leave it in mixed-use Perdido Key. HDR is not as, the purpose of that zoning district is not for conservation. There is a recreational Perdido Key zoning district that would allow both the protection of the wildlife and public use. So I believe a rezoning of the HDR would have been more appropriate here to Perdido Key recreational. But speaking to the criteria of the staff, that the staff put here, there's not a lot of backup here. That there was parking, but I don't see any type of backup that showed there will be adequate parking. There has, as people have said, there's been no study done. There's been nothing that has been passed through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The county has said the relevant authority here is the Land Development Code, but besides the Land Development Code, of course, it's the Comprehensive Plan and the Habitat Conservation Plan, which they did not put into evidence, and it is also the Perdido Key Master Plan. So those things are not put in here by the county as relevant authority, and they should be. This beach access would not follow the Perdido Key Master Plan, and that will be an issue. The Perdido Key Master Plan is very clear that the beach access should be located near the town center. So of course, it looks like I'm running out of time real quick, but the reason why I'm speaking is because I believe a commitment, like a master plan and a comprehensive plan, those are commitments to the community. And just like where I live up in the sector plan, the county should be following the approved master plan that they already have. So not only just getting a conditional use for part of the use is inappropriate, and they should be following their master plan. And also there was a letter from the Fish and Wildlife that said they preferred this to be used as mitigation, and that they promoted a trade. And I think that should have been given to you guys as evidence also. It was in the backup for the meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Board, any questions of the speaker?
Ms. Rogers, do you oppose or support the proposition?
I oppose the conditional use. I don't think it's appropriate based on the Land Development Code, and I don't think this is a proper access if you are going to follow the approved Perdido Key Master Plan.
You do realize that there is paving out there for parking already?
Yes, it's in a deteriorated state, yes, and there has been no analysis yet to know if it's going to have to be replaced or what state it's in, but I believe that this property has value as mitigation to build a larger beach access in the place where the master plan calls for, which is near the town center. And that's what the master plan calls for. If the master plan needs to be changed, then there should be public hearings, but people in Perdido Key worked very hard to pass that master plan, and we cannot be changing it, not even for the county, and the county has not shown the proof here that there is going to be adequate parking, and that's something they're claiming they have, but they just said it. They didn't show the proof.
You mentioned a town center.
Yes, sir.
I'm out on the Key a lot. I've never seen a town center.
Right. It's
since the colors blew away.
Right. It's in the Perdido Key Master Plan, though. You are aware of that it's called for in the Perdido Key Master Plan, that they're a town center, and that the beach access, the idea envisioned in the master plan is that there would be parking there, and people wouldn't have to have so many automobile trips, that there would be bike lanes, there would be shopping there would be beach access, restaurants, and things like that. And that's what was envisioned in the master plan. I'm sure there's people here that could speak to that more, that were involved in that master plan process. But reading it, that's what I see.
And we can ask the staff, but the master plan is a guideline.
It's a guideline for
development. It's not something that the county's going to build.
No, it would be private development, but that's why you have a master plan, because you direct development according to that master plan. And so putting beach access where it's not, where the master plan does not call for it, would be contrary to your master plan. And in your land development code under Perdido Key districts, it says that you're going to follow the Land Development Code and the Perdido Key Master Plan. That's in your Land Development Code. And so that is a relevant authority, which of course the Habitat Conservation Plan would also be relevant authority.
So, Ms. Rogers, if I understand you, then in a nutshell, your opposition is based upon your contention that the county is not following its own planning documents. Is that?
That's my song that I sing throughout the county. They don't follow their own planning documents, but I also think on a technical note that this is an inappropriate conditional use. This will never be high-density residential. So to get a conditional use on high-density residential, this should be conservation, future land use with a recreational PK designation, and that would give you both your recreational and your conservation at the same time. But the county has made no provision for conservation in this application. They've only asked for the beach access part, but clearly 76% of this is for conservation. So why are they not rezoning or changing the future land use for that? That's...
Ma'am, and up until the county bought this property, they could have put a condo back there.
Right, but the money that they...
The Sundown condos
right.
were there, they could have rebuilt them.
Right, but the money that they bought it with, it has restrictions on it, and so everything has to go through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and has to be approved. You see, Mr. Day, Tim Day, had written a letter that they did not submit to, and saying that we don't know undetermined amount of parking. So right there, they've proved that they don't know how much parking. I have a copy of the letter. I think some other people have it and are going to submit it. But yes, it is restricted that the majority of this has to be conservation. And in the grant application that I read, the Fish and Wildlife, I believe it was, no, it was the TPL, the Trust for Public Land offered to have Escambia County apply for a grant for that other 26% that we paid, that we could have had it all reimbursed, put it all in conservation. And why is that important? Because mitigation of that land, if we don't develop on that, if we just leave it as habitat, we can have a bigger, better access that's more appropriate in the Perdido Key Master Plan.
Not to keep prolonging this, but the commissioners disagreed with that. And the reason they said was that people that don't live on the key needed beach access.
And this would provide beach access.
And that's why they voted to make this a beach access area.
I'm going to have to agree with Mr. I forget the lawyer's name, that it was very politically motivated. It was a time where there's beach access in Walton County, there's beach access, and people just said, open the beaches. And I'm all for beach access.
I think we're missing something. We've been trying to get beach access out there on Perdido Key for 20 years that I know of.
Right.
It wasn't a political issue.
Well,
It
now...
was made a political issue.
Exactly, that's what I meant.
But it wasn't.
No, I understand. It is a restore, it is one of the top restore things for that district. I understand all that.
Really hurt enough.
Councilor, you have some. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just for clarification, Perdido Key Master Plan, what was adopted was a plan and an accompanying map. The map has an overlay of, which is called the Town Center Overlay, which contains the areas that any new development will have to meet those standards included in the plan. The overlay extends 2 parcels on the Gulf side west of River Road. It does not continue past the state park to where this piece of property is located. The master plan absolutely encourages public beach access at the town centers. It does not prohibit it in other areas.
Thank you, sir. Councilor?
Thank you. Ms. Rogers, you indicated that you do not live on Perdido Key, correct?
No, sir.
You had a lot of detailed information regarding the zoning and the process in Escambia County. What is your particular expertise in that area?
I attend the monthly planning board meetings. I kind of became a planning nerd. I have been to the Department of Administrative Hearings a couple times, challenging some some with success, some with not success, the county on some of their comprehensive plan changes and a change to the sector plan, so I just kind of have studied it on my own.
And with regards to this particular issue and your reference to the Perdido Key Master Plan, you heard the clarification by staff, but it is true that the master plan is to be a guiding document for the development on Perdido Key, correct?
Yes, I mean, I have a document here I copied it from the Article 4 of the Land Development Code, LDC 394, and it says, Perdido Key districts, this article establishes the zoning districts that apply to all areas of Perdido Key under the jurisdiction of the BCC, and I'll skip down, but it says each district establishes its own permitted and conditional land uses, site building requirements, and other provisions, and then it says consistent with the stated purpose of the district, the adopted Perdido Key master plan, and the mixed use, in this case, this is because it's mixed use right now, mixed use Perdido Key future land use category. So the Land Development Code does say that the Perdido master plan that was adopted is a guiding document, yes.
And you indicated to the board that the commissioners had the option, because there exists in the Land Development Code both the conservation zoning for Perdido Key and the recreational zoning district for Perdido Key. Who would approve zoning changes on Perdido Key? What body?
I believe the planning board, would come before the planning board, and when I came in this morning, I had studied it last night. When I came in this morning, I just verified that there was a conservation flue that is on Perdido Key, and there is the recreational Perdido Key zoning district, because those were what I thought were appropriate.
And if the planning board recommended, that would go to the Board of County Commissioners for approval, correct?
Whether they approved it or denied it, yes, it would go to the BCC.
So they have the way, the Board of County Commissioners has a way to put a park on this particular parcel without bothering this board. Isn't that correct?
I believe so. I think that that's more appropriate, that type of future land use and that zoning.
No problem. Thank you, sir. Board members, any questions of the speaker?
I don't have a question of the speaker, but I have a question of Tim Day, if he could come up.
I will have one or two questions.
Oh, sorry. You want
I'm at the board's disposal.
to? Yeah, let's finish with them, and then I'll.
Okay, you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ma'am. You mentioned a letter from the Fish and Wildlife Service that you believe to be in the board package, which has been handed over objection in this proceeding. Is that my understanding correct?
No, sir, I'm sorry. What I meant to say was it was in the county commission meeting, and I don't believe it's been entered into evidence, but I think it should have been. It was in the county commission backup for that when it was discussed at the county commission, so I'm surprised that the staff has not entered it, but I have a copy of it. I've kind of highlighted the things that I thought were important, but I'd be happy to enter it as additional evidence. It was in the Board of County Commission meeting. It's a letter from Tim Day, and he could verify if this is accurate, to Christy Yanchis, I don't know how you say her name, and her reply, what she would prefer. So,
But that hasn't been put into the record in terms of what the Fish and Wildlife's position is with regard to any development on that parcel, much less any specific development that this board has considered.
no, and that would surprise me that wasn't even mentioned as relative authority. So, but I'd be happy to submit it, or if someone has an unmarked copy, they could submit it.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, sir. Staff, any questions of speaker?
No, sir.
Seeing none. Thank you, ma'am. And you wanted Mr. Day.
And he alluded to my question. We talked about the beach mouse habitat supposedly being on the site for 4 years, and I just wanted you to kind of clarify as an expert this conservation area, whether or not it was ever a conservation area, whether it was ever considered the beach mouse habitat, those types of things as far as environmental issues on this particular site.
Okay. So, once again, Tim Day. I also administer the county's habitat conservation plan. The site plan that's on your screen represents what is essentially a shift of existing footprint. So if you looked at and visited the site today, and you can see it in the aerial, there's existing pavement that runs east to west, and this representation ultimately is a clustered form for public access to occur. So as part of the process, the excess pavement on the west side of the property would be removed, and that footprint essentially transferred into the proposed design. In coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, if we're going to have public access on the site, they've indicated that they would support this as a clustered development, and it would provide a very good corridor going north-south along the western part to provide access to the large dune feature that's on the north side, which was actually the feature that drew U.S. Fish to work with the county to acquire this property.
And that dune, let me go back. Let me ask you a pointed question. Was this property back in 2014 when I guess an existing building was there after it was demolished and prior to Escambia County purchasing it, ever a beach mouse habitat excluded area?
So what would have been, I'm going to try to answer it the way I think you're asking. Drew, do we have an old picture or not? A pre-Ivan picture? Okay. So the way to answer it is where the development used to sit, which is the area of asphalt just north and the polygon that's just to the south. That all was previous development, and although it's listed critical habitat, that polygon just south is not actually critical habitat. It's a different category that's called suitable habitat. But it would be true that the polygons on the north side of the property and the south side are all considered critical habitat as it was designated in 2005. So I'm not sure if I quite got it.
It was designated as critical, not suitable in 2005.
Correct. 2005, 2006.
And that's after Ivan.
Correct. And so to continue, the reason you see the polygon that the cursor's over right now is in 2012, U.S. Fish and Wildlife did another review of the key, and areas that were former footprints that were just where a condo or a house was destroyed by Ivan but had that period of time to naturally regrow vegetation, it was detected those areas may contain mice, and so those areas were designated as suitable habitat.
Okay, being that this property in 2005 is now considered a critical habitat, would that weigh in on any future development?
So the way it works, so the answer is yes. If there's any type of habitat designated in an area you'd like to develop, it requires a permit through the Habitat Conservation Plan. In this particular case, I'm going to call it a relatively easier permit to issue because of shifting the footprint from the west side to the east side in a fashion that makes sense for conservation. It's an easy permit for me to issue. It's essentially, the best example I can give you is homes before Ivan that were a little too close to the Gulf. When they went to rebuild after Ivan, some folks chose to build closer to the road. We issued those permits right away because it made sense, because it made less habitat fragmentation and it made that construction safe. That's essentially what the same kind of process we're doing with shifting the footprint. as proposed.
And as you know, I'm familiar with wetlands and that type of permitting through different federal and state agencies. I'm not too familiar with animals and habitats and so forth. So would this development as proposed require a permit other than that issued by the county?
No.
Do you actually get a permit from Fish and Wildlife or?
No, it's, what'll happen is there will be a county permit associated with the development that'll formalize the shift in the footprint.
Right.
However, in association with the land acquisition itself, the county is required to provide a management plan for this site as part of that process.
A management plan for the benefit of the beach
So
house.
when the county purchased the property through the Section 6 grant, one of the conditions of that grant is that the county prepare a management plan for it. And so that will, describe all the land uses on it. And in the cases of a public access, it'll describe the measures we're going to take to minimize conflict between public use and the habitat conservation on the site.
Okay.
And once we get a design engineer on board to confirm that the site plan as proposed will work or modified per that engineer, that'll give us sufficient information to go to U.S. Fish and begin that process to develop that plan.
That conservation plan.
Right, the management plan for the site, and that's when we'll get the official concurrence from U.S. Fish that the proposed use is comparable with the intent of what the land was purchased for, meaning both conservation and public access.
I have a question, Mr. Day. Is the yellow line at the bottom, is that the high water mark?
No, so if you think of beach mouse habitat, they're generally in the vegetated areas of the dune. And so that southern boundary is not really a fixed line. As the beach gets wider, you would expect the dune line to slowly creep to the south. If we have storms or erosion, it goes north. And so that was the line that U.S. Fish kind of put almost in the middle of the bathing beach this is a good point of assumption of where habitat would extend to.
And if I understand mechanically how this will work, there will be a walkway created,
Yes, sir.
over the dunes walkway, and the public will be able to go over the habitat and actually go down to the beach itself. Is that right?
That's correct. It's anticipated that whatever parking area is developed, that we would have a split rail fence or some other physical barrier to help keep the public in the desired parking area with a dune walkover that would facilitate people walking over on top of the dunes and down to the beach to be able to enjoy the bathing beach.
Right. And so in theory then, the two uses would not conflict with each other because the mouse habitat would be protected from human trampling or contact, and yet the public would be able to get access to beach front land in an area where it's very difficult for people ordinary visitors who don't have property there or condos to actually be able to enjoy the beach. Is that the theory behind it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what about the actual, has anyone projected the usage? I'm sure that there will be a lot of people who would like to have this advantage, to be able to go right down to the beach. What about parking and how will usage be governed? Do you know?
I'm not quite certain I understand the question.
Well, you have 100 people show up for spaces that there are 10 there. I mean, how are you going to control the access, I guess you might say?
Presumably, just like our other county public accesses, the sheriff's department be utilized for, parking violations or over parking.
Okay.
Board, any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I have some cross-examination.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Again, George Meade for Marseille. So as I understand your testimony, you do not currently have a concurrency determination on the specific plan for the use that this board is considering from Fish and Wildlife, is that right?
I have correspondence from Ms. Yanches that was provided to the board that suggested of the two options provided to the board, that the one displayed today is the preferred option.
And the determination of concurrency, as you indicated, and the fact of a finding of concurrency by Fish and Wildlife consistent with the management plan you've described, that will not be done as you've described it until sometime later in the process, is that right?
That would be correct, because from a design perspective, I have to know what features we're going to propose and what protective measures we're going to propose to be able for U.S. Fish to evaluate their effectiveness.
And until you have those features and those facts, you don't have anything to present to Fish and Wildlife for them to evaluate, is that right?
Yes. Just trying to figure out how to answer your question. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has seen this design that's shown today. And of the couple designs that we've been looking at, they've indicated a preference for this design.
But that preference is not a finding you can act upon and go ahead and execute this plan, is it?
No, because we still have to develop the amenities and the conservation measures in which will minimize impact between the public use and conservation.
And in fact, are you aware that an engineering study has been funded to determine whether or not this plan, as it is presently presented to this board, is even adequate for the site requirements?
Yes, I've been given direction to hire an engineering firm for the design.
So the scope and scale, numbers, et cetera, footprint, all of that could change based upon the engineering that is to be supplied, correct?
I'm going to say we need to kind of ferret that question out a little better.
Please do.
The overall footprint, besides the driveway, is limited to 0.4 acres under board direction, because if we exceed 0.4 acres, it'll trigger a slightly different permit from me, because we'll exceed the amount of footprint that's existing asphalt on the site today, which will then require monetary fees to be paid by the board, both upfront and on a per parking space basis. So the footprint itself in terms of area is fixed.
But what limitations on capacity can you tell this board that Fish and Wildlife may impose upon your plan once it is submitted? Do you know?
I do not.
Okay. I have a question. If we can go back to the critical habitat plan depiction, if you would. If you would please explain for the record, there are areas that are highlighted in color on the map and then a boundary in red. The boundary in red is the parcel in question, correct?
That would be correct.
And the highlighted areas, would you describe what they represent specifically?
So if we could go polygon by polygon.
Sure.
So that is critical habitat?
This is the northern portion with the scrub?
Yes, it's
Okay.
critical habitat. That also is critical habitat.
And that's across the entrance road on the northern portion?
That's correct.
All right.
That is suitable habitat.
This is the southern portion below the drive area, lateral across the parcel?
That's correct. It's the former footprint of the Sundown condominium.
All right. And that is those are all in green, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the portion to the south of the former condominium is the primary and secondary dune system, which is also critical habitat.
And that also appears to be, is it green or yellow? I can't quite tell.
It's the same color.
Same
as
color.
everything else.
All right. Now, The other portions here, is this critical habitat overlay, is that consistent for the adjoining parcels as well? Those are all similar critical habitat where they're shown as colored like that?
That's correct.
Up in the upper left-hand corner of the package submission here on the critical habitat map, there's a parcel that is highlighted across the road. Do you see that?
I do.
Are you aware of that status?
If it's, presuming this was drawn with our critical habitat GIS layer, I would expect that to be critical habitat.
Right, and you're aware that there is critical habitat across the road, correct?
Absolutely.
And are you aware that there are in fact access ways that have been provided under the road for mice in various portions?
They were not provided as access points. They were provided as an FDOT test to see whether culverted crossings would work in the case we were moving forward with a 4-lane project. It's an FDOT initiative.
Okay. But that is in fact an initiative that is going forward.
The study's complete.
Okay. So the study's complete, the moving forward, so barring anything else, that's going to be done to provide some connection of some sort.
It's already been done.
It's the study's done, and the 4-lane project at this point anyway is not moving forward.
All right.
But it has nothing to do with the management of mice in terms of habitat conservation or development on the key.
Do you have any information that you can provide the board based upon either the HCP or any of your workings with the Florida Wildlife, the Fish and Wildlife Service, with regard to impacts to the other critical habitat areas shown on this map or in the nearby vicinity off this depiction?
Are you asking whether there's been permits issued?
No, I'm asking if you've had any determination as to impacts of the change of use in this parcel with regard to the other habitat areas that connect or are nearby.
Can you ask it one more time? I apologize.
Have you had any determination, or do you have anything independently to offer that shows what impact, if any, this conditional use change will have on this critical habitat or the critical habitats that adjoin or are nearby?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Our next speaker will be Larry Downs, and Michael McCormick has relinquished his time to you, and Kirk Wade has released his time to you.
All right, I'm Larry Downs, Jr., 12156 Hadberg Drive, Pensacola, Florida. There's been a lot of talk from the citizens and from the attorneys, Mr. George Mead and Mr. William Dunaway. Sorry about that, my writing's bad. Anyways, this, that master plan is nothing more than a guideline, just like the sector plan and everything else. If there is absolutely zero leeway with these plans, then I don't think we're in the United States of America. We have to have flexibility in anything we do. This was purchased from Mr. Mead's client, from what I understand, and possibly even Seafair.
Point of order, I don't represent Sundown.
Okay. You represent the one that has the access across the street?
No, that's Sundown.
Sundown, all right. Well, anyways, I'm sure Sundown Riverside is, is involved with this in some manner because they have access to the People's Beach that we were forced to purchase. Now, if it was up to me, I'm more of a freedom person, get your own access. And that's, matter of fact, this is not political for me. At the time of all of this going down, I was actually at the commission meetings arguing with the guy that I supported, Douglas Underhill County Commissioner of District 2. I was arguing with him about acquisitioning more property. I said, y'all do more harm than good. Hence, look what we have here. All of this money and time being wasted. So I was arguing against acquisitioning more property. But this property was purchased with the slated use as habitat conservation, and public beach access. You can't change that fact. Now, force us to buy something with our money, and it's all our money. Grant money is our money. Pretty sure we all pay federal taxes in here. That money was purchased with federal grant money, which is, I don't even like the word grant. That should be federal tax money and local tax money. So it was forced upon us. Now don't let one single county commissioner change the slated use that we were told the purchase was going to be made. Now, if these people, they want it, the majority of the people want this beach access, there's no reason why it shouldn't be made. And maybe some of these people want to go out there and see the beach house. But I can tell you from my personal experience with with D2 Commissioner, he believes this is a rat, and he laughs about it, and we've done it while we worked out together. This is nothing more than a ploy to direct business to some of his campaign contributions, which are the developers, or some of them, and to get paid back for the campaign contributions that came from some of the condo owners adjacent, across the street, from, for him to keep this from being public access. And I'm pretty sure that the emails were made public here. It took some people some time to get it. I wasn't involved in getting it. But this is from Douglas Underhill. We are rapidly facing a closing window on the ability to buy beachfront land. So we don't even know if we're going to be able to buy anymore, and he knows it. Let's open what we have. Land to ensure access to the water for all. A climbing market, the asking price always outstrips the appraisals, putting us in a tight crunch due to our foolish rules. That's from our D2 County Commissioner. Now, whenever you're talking about foolish rules, he is. Of course they're foolish. We have too many of them. Now we're in a conundrum. These people, or these attorneys, and who they represent, they want the benefit of the people owning that property without Joe Public being denied access to it. And I don't blame them. If I lived next to it, maybe I wouldn't want Joe Public there either. But then again, if they wanted it for their own private use, then they should have purchased it themselves for $3.1 million. Douglas says, he also says, I was disappointed to find that the effort to sell the old Sundowner property to Seafarer as habitat conservation piece turned out to be impossible. This property cannot be used for both habitat protection and beach access. That's simply untrue. Of course it can. It is, he says, it is not suitable for beach access because there is no suitable support structure of commercial properties that would be needed to support the day visitors. Well, that's ridiculous. There's a commercial property right next door. And why would you want to concentrate the entire public into one area unless you are trying to drive business to certain individuals? Why wouldn't you want them more spread out? I mean, traffic-wise and everything. This is just simply a farce. And I believe the threat of a lawsuit is a bluff. And let them spend their money. We've already been forced to spend our money. Let's spend more. This is about doing the right thing for the people. If you force us to buy something, use it for what you say you're going to use it for. That's the reason why the overwhelming support of the commissioners are to open this beach. There's only one that's against it, and isn't it amazing that lots of campaign contributions were made his way. Now, I didn't come on board with this until about 5 weeks ago. So he can't say it's political with me. I supported him. I purchased signs. I went and made videos, all kinds of stuff, until I seen that these lies were made public. And I told these people here who are kind of crazy, and I'm crazy, I said, Y'all show me the smoking gun, and I will get on board with what's right. They showed me the smoking gun, which was Douglas calling our citizens, Randy Cudd, a liar for simply asking a question. Were you entertaining selling a portion of that property to Seafair? Liar. That was Douglas's response. It's on video. It's on YouTube. Was there an offer made? Liar. If you listen to his voice, it is disturbing to say the least. That's why I had to change my position. I don't want a Democrat. Now I don't even want a Republican. I'm fed up with these lies. I'm fed up with this two arms of the same body, all trying to manipulate us. And under the guise of protecting a mouse, he has no respect for that mouse, in my opinion, from my personal conversations with him. And neither does most of the people in this community. It's a way to manipulate development. I mean, I'm sure there's people that love them. And why not give the people an opportunity to go down there to that beach access and look at those beach mouses? I mean, what better way, if you're going to be a protector of the beach mouse, than to give the public an opportunity to see them in their natural habitat from a protected area? This whole plan that they have designed is going to protect that beach mouse, which I'm not even for. It's a rodent. You know, I mean, I'm a realist. It's a rodent. Come on. We could put 1,000 beach mouses out there of all types just because it's got a small strand, but that's another argument. We should move forward with this. I have a lot more, but thank you. I would love some questions by the attorneys. That would give me more time.
No questions from Mr. Larry.
I did bring my Constitution book, so I'm going to bring some for everybody.
Yes, sir. One little piece of housekeeping. I don't know how this affects it going forward. Not an attorney, thank goodness. I believe Mr. Downs was saying this email he's referring to must have come through someone's public records request.
It did.
I just wanted to point out that hasn't been submitted to evidence, so at this point, it's him saying what someone else said. So just kind of keep that in mind.
You can keep that in mind as hearsay. That's fact.
Any questions from the board, Mr. Downs? Do the attorneys desire to cross?
No, thank you.
I have nothing.
Okay.
Smart move.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you much. I hope y'all do the right thing.
Thank you, sir. May Dean.
Yes, May Dean, 13356, North Arm.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, first I have one question, and that's for Mr. Jones. So when you all put that BOCC into record, did you include all the other things that were included, the documents, the letter from Christie? Because I also believe that the letter from Christie Yanchich should be included because it was part of the BOCC decision.
It can be in the interest of what we're trying to rush through. It was just the page from the clerk's office where they.
Yeah, I saw that,
certified
so that did not include the letter and the attachments to the agenda.
No, the hard copy contains the link. It's not the digital copy, which then brought in the rest.
Okay,
It
but
can
you
be
think
accessed.
if that's included, that this board should have a copy of her,
If
of that
the board is
attachment?
so wishes, I do agree with you. It's not
Okay.
good. If there's no objection, hold
Okay.
all the backup.
That's what I wanted to make sure that was what you asked for, the whole thing. Can y'all read that? Or, I mean, I'm gonna make remarks on her letter, so I just thought you should have it to read.
Yes, all of that, that's just his presentation. If that's it, yeah. I'm on board with that. So, Mary?
I'll make copies.
we have no objection to the package, which was options to develop public access on Perdido Key, dated October 9, 2018, presented by Mr. Tim Day, and a 3-page email string from Mr. Day and Christie.
Tim, I already have copies of it. I'm afraid I don't have the 13. If you want to look over this, I can hand it out right now.
If you want to, I'll make copies for the audience.
Okay, but do you want to look at this and make sure?
I can recognize it from here.
Okay. Can I give it to him?
No.
You need to ask.
Ask that it be entered into evidence.
Yes.
Board members, do we have a motion to accept those documents into record?
Mr. Chairman, what is it? What documents are you talking about? Maybe if they could get it done.
Tim can tell
Mr.
you
Goodman,
what
what I have here, this is 3 pages of email here between Fish and Wildlife and Mr. Day.
Did not Mr. Day just talk?
It says, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's the subject line, let's see, it says discussion regarding public access use of former Sundown property on Perdido Key.
And Mr. Day just testified to those emails, correct?
Yes.
Did he not explain, not verbatim, but explain the back and forth between him and Fish and Wildlife? In our discussion earlier, you had alluded to what Fish and Wildlife said in your discussions back and forth. I'm assuming that was through email.
So correct. So what that email does detail is a discussion on 2 options that were discussed in front of the board. It also provides additional suggestions that Christie was asking the county to explore regarding some of the discussion on conservation options that the county may want to consider. There is additional information within it that was provided to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we go ahead and accept it in.
Okay, we have a motion by Michael.
Second.
Second by Bill. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Accepted into evidence. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe that changing the use of this property is in keeping with the requirements of U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the criteria required by the county. In the letter from Christie Yanchich, she will require the closing of the area at dusk by use of a gate, and the county will not be able to provide this requirement. As you heard, the property is right next to a restaurant, and probably by 5 o'clock, those patrons may begin using this property, this parking lot for their use, and then you will have to gate it and close it, and it won't have any lightings, and so it'll be either a nuisance or just not meet the criteria. And then the next thing is the parking lot is in a valley. And if we could go back to the picture of what will be allowed, the ability for a fire truck to come down that lane, I don't know which picture that is, the one with the little, the area that you'll be able to use to develop.
It's up
The developable. Okay. Yes, this is a 1 lane right there, and then that small area. Our first responders on Perdido Key it is always a fire truck. The sheriff very rare is out there. And so I don't believe that a fire truck will be able to make it down that lane and turn around. And just like you were addressing, that we will probably have a lot of overflow in this parking lot, and people may be parking and restricting access to this property. Also for an ADA bathroom and the other requirements of ADA, I don't know that it's even going to fit. So I don't know that this property really even meets any of the criteria designed by staff. And also, if we want to talk about money, I am a taxpayer in this county, and the price per parking space, if you change this criteria, will be outrageous. The development of this piece of property is going to be very expensive. It will have to have all of the new ADA compliant, and we know that the grade on that is very low, so it'll have to crisscross. That'll be expensive walkover. The little bit of area that you will be able to develop will not provide very many parking spaces, and the cost per parking space will be very high. Perdido Key would rather have this parking beach access moved closer to site number 3, where the land is not down in a valley, it's flat. You can provide more parking spaces than you can on this. This property has been looked at. I would like to ask these people, how many of you were even at the Perdido Key Master Plan meetings, or all the, I have lived on the Key 35 years, and I have been to every public meeting.
When Douglas Underhill, she asked.
Point of order, please.
Yes, sir.
I have been, long before Douglas Underhill ever ran for office, I have been at every public meeting. I have been a board member of the Perdido Key Association for 12 years, and we have planned and studied and worked very hard. And our limited sources on Perdido Key need to be put somewhere other than this piece of property. It needs to be maintained as conservation habitat. Thank you.
We need a little time, just a second.
Okay.
Any questions of the speaker from the board? Councilors, do you have any cross? Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Randy Cudd, and you have the time also to you of Dorothy Gary.
Yes, and she has not sworn in. Does she need to swear in to make this time relevant?
I thought she was letting you speak for her.
She is. I am. But I want to make sure that we don't have any lawyer instances. Okay, before my time starts, I'd like to apologize to the counselor here. I'm going to assume that he made a mistake in calling me Mr. Crud. That happened to me a lot during my 4th grade and 5th grade time. So, and I kind of reacted to it, and I apologize for the outburst. Okay, you can start my time now. Good afternoon. So how do you like the dog and pony show so far? In regards to how long people have been involved in this project, I go back to the time that it was purchased, and prior to that, when I was working with the commissioner at the time, Gene Valentino. The board bought this property specifically for 2 reasons. The first reason was public access. The LOST money used and allotted for it was for public access. It worked in conjunction with a desire to achieve more conservation habitat for the beach mountain. But the reason the county board of county commissioners went into this agreement was for more public access. Now, if you will look very closely, you will see the U.S. Fish and Wildlife was very specific to the public beach access within their grants. You will see that, well, you won't see this, but I have spoken to every county commissioner, past and present, with the exception of Douglas Underhill. And there has been some conversation with him that has been relayed to you, where he called me a liar in regards to the attempt to sell to Seafarer Condominium this public beach. He called me a liar, while in fact he had been in negotiations for a year previous. So I really wasn't the one who was the liar. But I've spoken to every other county commissioner, some of them on record, in the BOCC meeting, and every one of them, with the exception of Mr. Bender and Mr. Underhill. Mr. Bender's brand new, and I've only carried on a light conversation with him. But Grover, who he replaced, all of the others, they all agreed, especially the ones that were there at the time, they all agreed that this was bought with taxpayer money for public beach access and conservation. Every document that supported the purchase of this property and the current documentation that controls what the county must do with this type of property, and this property in specific, reinforce the intent of the past and current BOCC. The deed indicates that the purchase was made in agreement with U.S. Fish and Wildlife using a Title VI grant. This grant provides for public access. The HCP requires the public access to beachfront property. The 2030 comp plan further requires that the county provide public access, inclusive of parking, to any of the waterfront property that the county owns. At every turn, the county, in coordination with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, have reinforced the public use of this property. Public lands bought with public money shall be available for public use. The smoke screen that we're involved in right now, what we're going through with the attorneys, which I invite also to cross-examine me. The smoke screen that we're dealing with is private interests on either side, right, left, and behind of this beach that has been utilized for 5 years as a private beach by the condominiums represented here and across the street. The folks, some of those folks, sold this beach to them. So they've had the private use of the beach while also making a ton of money in the process. I'm standing here, I'm not white, I'm not black, I'm not brown, I'm not yellow. And I don't live on Perdido Key anymore. I might live in Cantonment. I might live in Treasure Hill. I might be a single father with 3 kids that can't afford to go to the federal park or the state park. We have to go to the county park. And the county park is not much right now. You got a combination of parking in the county parks that's less than the parking, and even all of the county beaches together don't even come close to the 340 feet here that this county owns as a public beach. I'm a citizen. I'm not a beach owner. I'm not an elitist. I'm here for those other people that can't afford to come down and enjoy Perdido Key, our beach. And so I'm representing them. And I'm upset because it takes such an effort for the obvious right thing to be done that it's insane. And I'm going to cede my time to these guys. Maybe before I do that, there is no preference listed by the Fish and Wildlife email. If you'll read into that really carefully, you'll probably see the part that says, well, you'll have to read the part that says the county, does the county own or can they acquire any other parcels adjacent to? Oh, no, that's too confusing. If you'll read into this email, you'll see that Jacqueline Rogers has perjured herself, or at least made a serious mistake. Fish and Wildlife does not have a preference in that email. They have suggestions, not a preference. All right, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Donovan.
Thank you, sir. And I appreciate that apology. And that was a misspoke.
I'm sorry that I overreacted.
No, thank you, Mr. Cook. You've been involved, you stated on direct, with this parcel since it was purchased when Mr. Valentino was the commissioner. Is that correct?
That's correct. When the board voted 100% to purchase it for public access.
And why is it just now, 5 or 6 years later, that the Board of County Commissioners has acted to direct the staff to put in a public access park?
Well, it's my opinion that the leadership in D2 for the last 4 years and the current leadership never made the effort to do what was intended by a 100% vote of the Board of County Commissioners. And so without that leadership effort, then it just didn't happen. And, you know, we gave him plenty of opportunity, but he could not rise to the occasion, or did not want to rise to the occasion. And I can speculate on those reasons, but they're just speculation.
Is it possible that those reasons might have involved the ability to increase the habitat for the beach mice and also to procure additional beach access for the citizens?
Well, of course, and nobody's arguing about additional purchases. I'll bet you there's not a single person in here other than Larry. Where's Larry at? other than Larry, who's going to argue about the county buying additional beach property. Absolutely. But we've already spent $3.2 million on this of my taxpayer, your taxpayer money. Your taxpayer money. 3.2. 200,000 to 300,000, maxed out probably, will get this beach opened up. But if we're going to buy that other property, I believe Douglas Underhill has stated it's $10 million for every 100 feet? I don't know, it's a ton of money. It's a ton of money. $300,000 to get you open, you guys could be down on the beach tomorrow if it's not raining.
So would it be fair to say that one of the reasons that this hadn't been open is political?
That would be your assertion, not mine. The reasons it hasn't been open is because of the bad leadership in District 2.
Yes. From a politician.
From the man who's in the chair, I guess, yeah, that's your words, but go ahead.
He says he's not a politician.
No further questions.
Oh, come on, that's it? Rex? Anybody else? All right, looks like I'm up. Thank you, I appreciate your time very much, and I apologize
Any
for my
questions
absence.
for Mr. Cudd?
You guys have any questions?
No questions. Thank you. Annie Griffin.
Good afternoon, Annie Griffin, 38 South Blue Angel Parkway. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I am opposed to this conditional use on this parcel for several reasons. First of all is the fact that the relevant authority stated is the Escambia County Land Development Code. There is another relevant authority, which is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, who has a vested interest in this property. And I'm glad that the email was entered into evidence so that you could read what their initial comments were in September of this year before this direction was made. I'm sorry, I haven't been sworn in. Pardon me. Andrew?
Just a second.
Do I need to wait? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just want to get on the recording. Ms. Wilson here is another one of our notaries, and she's going to be swearing in Ms. Griffin.
Okay, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for that. I'm nervous, so I got a little ahead of myself. All right, Annie Griffin, 38 South Blue Angel Parkway. I have been a Perdido Key community activist for many, many years. I'm not old, but I've been around a long time and have spoke before the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustment and the BCC on Perdido Key issues for many, many years. My objections to this conditional use is the fact that I feel like it's not an appropriate way to handle this. Perdido Key has a zoning district which will address this kind of a request. It should be REC PK, which would provide for a wildlife sanctuary as well as public access. I also want to go on record with the board to understand that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a vested interest in this property, and they are a relevant authority that had not been, is not being addressed at this hearing. And we don't know what they're going to allow or they're not going to allow, so this is really, really premature. A proper way to handle this would be a zoning change, which would move this property to RECPK, which would allow a wildlife sanctuary as well as public access. There is public access to this property right now from both sides on the beach and through the Crab Trap Restaurant. It has not been closed off. The public access that is being utilized by the Sundown or Riverside property is through an easement that went as part of the purchase. They have a right to use it. And tourists as well as Escambia County residents have been using this beachfront property all along. I'd also encourage you to understand that, yeah, this has come up. It has come up. I'm sorry. Thank you for your time.
Any questions of the speaker board? Staff, any questions? Attorneys, any questions? Okay, I think board, we may need a 5-minute break, or maybe 10. With no objection, we'll take a clean break.
Second for that motion.
Oh, these are fun.
The lawyer that called and said, "Jay, who would you recommend?" Just recommended other lawyers who would say, "Oh, yeah, okay, we'll get back to you."
Like 10
Oh, yeah.
Oh, someone there has to be put on.
Yeah. I don't know who. I wish there's going to be a channel to find that lawyer.
Did you sign up with Tom?
I'm still making my little notes.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what I want to say, pretty much what I said in that video.
Oh, yeah.
Because I really want to point out this little private strip right here.
That's what I was thinking. If they have access, they was walking like this.
There you go.
I have video of that if you like it.
What, my video that I did?
No, I've got other videos too. Yeah, your video. I'm surprised someone has been flying drone.
Yeah. Well, you know, they're talking about having access through other ways. That should be all they can use. But the point is, it's
Jump up and go out there and protect the mouse. Firepower.
put on our sidearms and our shotguns just in case anyone poaches the
Oh,
mouse.
yeah, absolutely. Get down to the wet sand. Get down to the wet sand.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a couple of
We may have another camera to deal with, you never know. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm gonna have fun with the so-called walkover that the Sundowner owns when I get up there and talk.
I've seen a beach mouse. I want to go
But you know,
beach mouse.
that crossover was built
Protect that thing. Yeah, cats. Actually, the problem is now because there's more
I know that
snakes
when they sold the
out on the
property,
key because they've got more mice. There's got a lot of beach needs out there. That's why you signed that. So, is that yours or Larry's? That's Larry's. Okay. Is yours safe?
Those are two separate properties. Yes, right here. That was Sundowner Beachside. But it's a different company, different corporation. However, they had multiple owners. They had a lot of owners in Sundowner Beachside, along with Sundown Riverside. And then whenever Beachside sold, all those other owners, they bought across the way. The other ones. And they used some of that money to build that walkway? I don't know that for sure. I think that makes sense because there was 6 feet. Right. Yeah. Just like I said, this person is here to start the work, you want another person to
So that's a white trash, and the cooler trash in front of the picture.
We're talking about X60, which can restaurant, condo sites. Both of those are private property.
They can be turned off at any time. In fact, Seafair is turned.
Yeah.
That's all misnomer. That's all smoking mirrors.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I'm gonna be doing that. Is there something you guys might have thought about?
Oh, I certainly would like to.
Since you had 6 minutes, I
And the sign still, so. Just got dressed Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the breakfast bars, yeah, we have your office space, everything, yeah. They had just gone to breakfast, you know, it's like, okay, I want my exit, I want to make sure the action doesn't need, it's not crispy, this dish is not crispy. No, well, the toast, okay? Remember that whole thing, the toast, okay, yeah. Did you toast my toast?
I guess the only
Yet another day.
But you weren't.
You're right.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, I actually. And if you want to cook something, I look at the college, but I like something that to go with, and, you know, that or a can of that, so you have that. Because that's.
When I'm done here, I can meet I predict at least 10
Larry was here last week.
Probably outside talking to someone, you know, he gets into something that time disappears.
Okay, we're going to get started again. Our first speaker will be Margaret Hostetter. I believe that's correct. You haven't been sworn? Okay, great.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And name and address.
Margaret Hostetter, 328 East Sunset Avenue, Pensacola. I'm here in support of the conditional use to allow for public access as well as the preservation of the beach, or the mouse habitat. I own several vacation rental properties, not on Perdido Key, but elsewhere. And when my guests come to the area, and they come year-round, but you know, especially during the summer, they're looking to go to the beach and enjoy various beach areas. So they've heard about Perdido Key, and they want to see it. And there's such limited access for public beach on Perdido Key that I believe this will be a big benefit for those who are, like my guests, tourists, as well as those that, you know, live here and want to have free access. Seems like I read an article in the News Journal sometime back about this, that the neighboring commercial restaurant, the Beach Trap, had even supported this, and I thought in the article they mentioned that they'd be happy for the people who use this beach access to use their beach as well. I'm sure they don't want the liability if something happened to somebody on the beach that they own, but it seemed like a neighborly offer was made, and that the people in the adjoining business were very happy to have this used in the fashion for public beach access. So that's my request, is that you consider that Pensacola Beach has wonderful facilities. Perdido Key does not. The plan, the master plan, and the town center and all that are on paper. They're not anywhere near coming to fruition. We already own this property, and so please utilize it as it was intended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Board, of the speaker? Councilors, do you all have any cross? Thank you. J.R. Jones.
Mr. Jones had to depart and will not be presenting, but he's part of my client.
Okay, thank you, sir. Susan Batson. She left. Alan Dennis.
I guess I need to be sworn in. Don't use my minutes to swear me in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name's Alan Dennis. I have a property of 16401 Perdida Key Drive. This board is being asked to grant a conditional use permit for the Sundown Perdida Beach mouse habitat based on certain findings of fact presented by the county staff. The fact is the county has not produced a management plan for this site. As you know, the grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provided most of the funds to purchase this land, so the county does not know what plans will be approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It's as simple as that. We can have all the passion we want in this room, but until U.S. Fish and Wildlife has a management plan that says what the county intends to do, not what their staff says they found, but what they are going to do, and it's been signed and approved by the county, all this other talk is just nice talk to talk about. The county does not know for sure whether its facilities and services will be adequate, whether ingress or egress will be sufficient, or whether any other criteria you are asked to consider will be compatible with the federally approved management plan. What we do know for sure is that Fish and Wildlife has told the county it is interested in discussing an option to transfer the development footprint on the Sundown parcel to a less sensitive tract of land and locating a beach access somewhere else. That communication apparently was not provided in the packet that y'all were given. That was a document from the person's, Christy Yanchis, who I know, Tim knows. Did you not feel slighted that you didn't get the information until you got to this meeting today? I have to quit preaching here. What we do know for sure is Fish and Wildlife has told the county it's interested. Okay. That communication apparently was not included in the application you received. The Seafarer would like to work with the county to make best use of the property, but the process begins with the development of a management plan, as the county promised to do when it accepted federal money to buy the land, not with the approval of a conditional use permit based on how the county might use the land. Furthermore, the county's lack of U.S. Fish and Wildlife approval management plan and the proposed use of federally funded habitat parcel as public parking and public beach access, a conditional use will be adverse to the public interest because public monies were spent for the Perdida Key beach mouse with the requirement that the county put in place an approved management plan. Again, allowing the use of without an approved plan will adversely affect and limit the options available for conservation and the habitat. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Board members, any questions of the speaker? Councilors, any cross? Thank you, sir. Michael Bearden.
I'm old, it's cold in here. I'm Michael Bearden, I live at 11716 Chanticleer Court in Pensacola. I do happen to be a beach owner, yes.
Have you been sworn?
Yes, I have been sworn in.
Thank you, sir.
And so I happen to have my own semi-private beach of my own. So you wouldn't think this would matter to me. But it does matter to me, even though I don't live there, because this land was purchased for the use of the public, for public access to the beach, as well as for protection of the mouse. Now, do we have a pointer I can use to point at that map? No. Can I use this microphone then? Yes, you can. Thanks. The reason I'm doing this is I want to point out a thing on this map. If you look to the left side of the property, it looks almost blue, this long line. That's the walkway that the Sundowner has to get to use this public beach as their private beach. It's also not ADA approved, by the way, because it's only got steps in the front at one end and steps in the south at the other end. And it's got a locked gate, so the only people that can get through there are the Sundowners on the other side of the road. The people that made $3.2 million selling it to the public. They get to use it as their private beach after they've taken in $3.2 million of our money. And they do it with a non-ADA compliant walkway over the area where the beach mouse is. Now, one of the questions asked was, what about the parking? There's not enough parking. As one other person stated, it's almost 3 times as much parking as the other places we have put together. We've got commercial site just to the left. Someone said there's there's public access on one side of it and the other side. There's no way the condos are going to let the public through on their side. And the other side, the Crab Shack, which is really good food, by the way, they could close it off and say no anytime. There's never been anybody parking in the property that we bought from the Crab Shack, so the issue of overflow could take it over and mess with it is a moot subject. The subject is only one few things. One, we bought the land for public beach access and protection of the beach mouse. 2, to protect the beach mouse, we build a ramp over it, just like the people that sold it to us for $3.2 million did, so they can have access. And we build that ramp, but ADA compliant, so that the public can have access. We've heard people state that they don't want the unwashed masses there. We've heard them say that white trash is there. The reality is, when that was said with the video, it wasn't even taken on this property. So my point is this: we purchased the property for public use and protection of the mouse. Let's use it for that, and let's get over all this stuff. We don't have a lot of money to use, like the way these condos do, to hire rich lawyers to try to defend something that's indefensible. They wanted to keep it private so that the unwashed masses don't overflow onto their side. The reality is, all beaches are public access. So let's use it for what it should be for.
Thank you. Board members, any questions of the speaker? Councilors, any cross?
Didn't think so.
Charles Krupnick.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Name and address, sir.
Yes. Glasses too. Yeah, I'm Charles Krupnick, 14500 River Road, Unit 203 in Pensacola. I'm the current president of the Perdido Key Association and would like to just add some background information to this hearing. PKA is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're concerned about the welfare and orderly development of Perdido Key and proper stewardship of the environment, proper property rights, and beach access and parking issues are among member concerns. Adequate beach access has become an important issue in many areas of Florida. For Perdido Key, it can be a problem during the summer vacation season, but rarely at other times of the year. As PKA president, I sometimes receive calls from beachfront property owners about what can be done to prevent illegal parking on their property, for example. In PKA's 2015 survey of Perdido Key property owners, about 50% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that public beach access was important, but 56.4% disagreed or strongly disagreed that there should be more beach access locations for the general public. And as a relevant issue, 64.5% of respondents also believe that the environment, including endangered species, should be protected in the growth of Perdido Key area. Perdido Key has 3 Escambia County beach access parking locations, all on the 2-mile portion east of Perdido Key State Park. It also has 3 parking areas for the 2 miles of Perdido Key State Park, and substantial parking for the over 2 miles of road accessible beach areas of the Perdido Key area of the Gulf Islands National Seashore. County parking areas are free. The state park day use fee is $3. The National Seashore day use fee is $20, which is pretty high. That can be mitigated for a free military pass, seniors, annual passes, and some other mitigation. PKA members would likely support Escambia County efforts to acquire more property, particularly more beachfront property, particularly to expand Beach Access 3, which is at the end of Perdido Key Drive, on Perdido Key Drive at the end of River Road, creating more parking and improving that facility, which is between the predominantly privately owned beachfront of the East Perdido Key and Perdido Key State Park, should help alleviate current beach access problems, and I think, be a terrific addition to Escambia County. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Board members, any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, councilors, any questions? Thank you. Park McAdams, and I believe Tracy McAdams will be speaking for both.
That's correct. And I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
Most everything has already been said. I'm just going to point out some facts
Just
here.
for the recording, please state your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tracy McAdams, 1620 Bush Street.
Thank you.
I live on the north part up by 9 Mile where it's a nightmare with traffic. So when I come down to visit, I want to relax, the beach is nice. Okay, now we're going to go to facts. Public beach access number 4, the property that we're talking about. It was indicated by the deeds that were sold that once these special warranty deeds, once the sale of the property was done, that county was out of it. That's a fact. The county owned that property. We paid them, they signed the documents, we send the documents, it's now county property. Okay? So, and in the deeds, there's 2 special warranty deeds. I don't have the actual sale of the property, I don't have a copy of that. I can get it though. It states in here what is all provided for, and I'm trying to talk fast because I want to get through this. Every mention of this property from the time to think about buying it to the time it was purchased to this date, everything includes public beach access. The beach mice, they're thriving. It's in the HCP. I have a copy of the HCP. I also made a list and pointed out every place in the HCP, now in here, I lost myself. The ADA, the HCP, the ITP, the Perdido Key Master Plan, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Program that they have. They have a plan also. I didn't know that until recently. And I started a list of every place in there where they mentioned the need for public beach access. It would take me 6 hours to just give you page numbers. So I quit doing that. And in this here, there's the beach mice are thriving. They're doing good. We've done our part. We'll continue to do our part as a county. We'll continue to make sure that they thrive. We'll also educate. We plan on putting signs up to tell how them rodents live and what they're good for, all that stuff. I also am not a mice lover. I don't like mice. They put in new housing by where I live. I have rats running across my fence 100 times a day. I don't like rodents. But they are cute. The Perdido beach mouse is cute. It does have a function. And yes, let's keep that function going. But we can do that with a walkover over the dunes, which is going to protect the sea turtles nesting. When they come ashore, they have a place of protection. It will help the piping plover bird and some of them other birds that the beach, they nest on the beach. It will help them. That walkover is going to keep people off of there. People that now trespass because there's still a no trespassing gated thing there, so the public can't get on there. You have to walk, get on the main water line, you walk. My mother's 80 years old. She came down to visit. We walked through the Sundown property so she could go to the beach. They want to arrest me for it? Arrest me. My mother came from Indiana for beach access. She got it. What did we harm? Nothing. We left no trash. We left footprints. That's what we left. And that's the goal of the master plan, the HCP, the ITP, every goal in there, leave only footprints. That's what we want to do as a county, as citizens. We want to leave our footprints. We want to enjoy our beach, leave our footprints, and everybody have a good day. The county citizens have tried to work with Seafarer on enhancing their walkover to comply with all these plans and ADA stuff, but they didn't want to. That was not an option for them. But they don't want, now they come and say they don't want us to have this access? I'm kind of confused. And I've heard that throughout sitting here, that the crab trap provides public access, which is, I believe, to the west of our property, the county's property, paid for. It said, someone had commented that they provide public access. That's not true. That's privately owned property. If their clients want to go and eat there and walk out to the beach, they provide that. If I go there and I just walk on the beach and not buy anything, am I a client? Does that make that public access? No, it doesn't. On the east side, we have the condos. We can't access theirs. It's gated off. What are we going to do? We get to walk, to enjoy Perdido Key, it's Perdido Key, Florida. Who doesn't like Perdido Key, Florida? You know, should we walk 5 miles to enjoy a piece of beach that has been bought and paid for? And we're willing to follow every guideline set forth to get this going. We're not trying to round any corners. We're not trying to, you know, undermine anybody, not even the beach house. We just want to get our access, provide the safety for the critters, all of them, whether they're endangered or not. Let's provide them some safety. Let's educate our children. Hey, this is a beach mouse. You know what my grandchildren think of mice right now? It's so good. And thank you for your time. I still
Board
have
members,
more.
any questions of the speaker?
If the lawyers have questions, can I defer them to Larry? I just thought I'd ask.
Councilors, any questions? Thank you very much.
No problem. Have a great day. Thank you.
Margarita Soul.
No, I did not, I checked, I do not speak.
Tammy Mercer.
Not speaking.
Just giving you a second chance. I know you said you didn't want to speak, but Dan Wagaman, if you have anything to say.
No, sir.
George Mind?
Me.
Mean?
Mr. Chairman, would this be the appropriate time for a closing argument, or should I?
Sure, I'll give you a closing, both of you.
I still had it.
Excuse me, I didn't recognize you.
I'll reserve mine for closing after you're done with all.
Sure. Thank you. Dan Clark.
Yes, sir. And for the Board, I've already been sworn in. My name is Dan Clark. My address is 12140 Avberg Drive, next to my fine and upstanding Patriot citizen.
Have you been sworn, sir?
Yes, sir.
Good.
All right. I'm definitely in favor of opening the public beach access number 4. And I do support the Habitat Conservation Plan and the public beach access. This is not politically driven for me, but however, I've taken a large interest in this because of everything that I've read versus you know, the public records requests and stuff and the attacks on certain citizens, including myself, by certain D2 commissioners. I would like to know where this town center is. You know, I've been trying to pay attention to this, and I'd like to just know where it is. I haven't seen. I know it's an idea. An idea is an idea. You can wipe your butt with it. All right, Perdida Key master plan to me just seems like Larry said, it's just a suggestion used to steer people and choice businesses around, you know, their favorites. Most of the other points pretty much have been made, but I was interested in the fire truck turnaround. I don't see no other fire truck turnarounds in any of the other accesses. I mean, they have reverse cameras, it works. I use it every day. And another thing, someone made another point about the overflow parking, you know, being at night and stuff like that, there's not be a gate there, someone to attend it. I know that's hogwash. A simple sign that says, if you park here, you'll be towed. Some record company would be happy to entertain that idea and be happy to tow those cars. It happens on Pensacola Beach every day. Let's see, this should have been open 4 years ago. I don't know what happened. I just wish it would, you know, there's a lot of stuff that come to light on it, and it has. I've seen the public records requests that have been found, and it's in the sunshine. I know there's more coming. I can't wait to read them. And another thing, I do seem to think that this, and I've heard a lot about it, about this, you know, lawsuit or whatever might be filed, whatever. I'm in agreement. I think it's just a smoke screen. I think it's just an open idea that what we can and can't do, and it's It's a bluff, 100% bluff. Anybody can see it, and half the people in this room. Yeah, I just wish we could move forward with this. About this handicap walkover, that's really sparked my interest. So let's just say I paid someone to rent one of these rooms across the street, whatever, that happens to be in a wheelchair, and I want him to have access to the beach. Being that we already know it's not ADA compliant, I can't wait for that lawsuit. I can assure you I'm going to push forward for it. Thank you.
Board members, any questions of the speakers?
I'd just like to clarify the fire truck issue. Public safety on these beach accesses is not to get a fire truck down there.
Right.
It's to get a watercraft and like a jet ski.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the wide board ramp that is being proposed would do that. So we're not trying to get a fire truck to the water.
I understand. I understand.
And the other beach accesses actually give you that opportunity. The problem they run into is if there's a drowning going on off of Seafarer or any of the condos in that area, they basically have to go to the Floribama to get on the beach or one of the other beach accesses, and it's not immediate for the emergency people.
Absolutely, and I understand that 100%.
Any other comments? Staff have any questions of the speaker? I'm going to call on the council to give a summary, and then I'll call on you, the applicant. But go ahead with that, and then staff.
I just needed to clarify the fire truck. The differences between access 2 and 3 and this site is our fire requires if any part of the development is more than 150 feet from where they can access, that we need to be able to get a truck on site. And so at accesses 2 and 3 where there's parking, that's all within 150 feet of the right of way. On this particular site, the drive coming in is approximately 150 feet. And so our fire has required the ability to get a truck on there as well. And kind of the broad square has been approved by our fire chief that it's minimally sufficient for that truck to be able to turn around and get off the site.
Fantastic. Good news.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I just had to clarify.
Okay. As I said earlier, we'll call on the attorneys to give a summary of their position, and then we'll call on the applicant and then staff for any summary statement that you might like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Despite the political issues broached by a number of the speakers, this is not a political decision. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding. It requires you to make findings according to the code based on proper evidence, even given the flexible standards we have. And unfortunately, while I think there are politics that have obviously been involved in getting to this point, and Mr. Dunaway may speak to some of those, and the propriety of what has been asked of you by the County Commission versus what the County Commission could itself have done and probably should do. My concern, and what I'm going to address, is the narrow question of do you have the evidence to support the findings you're required to make in order to grant this conditional use to the applicant, and the answer is plainly no. And I'm going to focus on the requirements to get the concurrent approval of an actual concrete plan, which you do not have, by the Fish and Wildlife Service to validate compliance with the HCP and with the conditions of the grant funding which control the use of the parcel. You do not have on the first item, A, general compatibility. You cannot show that this use is compatible with adjacent properties and other properties in the immediate area with regard alone to the other habitat properties and the impact on the beach mites of what you're proposing to do here in turning this use, and it's increasing its intensity, increasing the vehicular traffic, all those questions that the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to have to look at with regard to the impact, the scale, the size, the footprint the use restrictions, et cetera. A number of those you see already reflected in the letter that Mr. Day solicited from the Fish and Wildlife Service. One thing, you're limited in having lighting, no nighttime use. There are other questions that they have in here making clear that the primary purpose for this parcel is conservation. That purpose is going to drive every other consideration that you have to look at in the elements of this conditional use finding that you have to make in order to make a valid conditional use grant. Moving on, the second thing, facilities and services. Again, because the primary use is conservation, it is going to drive these requirements. And if there's going to be any reduction or change in terms of the capacity or size of the facilities that are planned, those are going to have to be addressed before this conditional use can be addressed. There is simply no way for you to meaningfully decide that that finding, that the adequate capacity to serve the proposed use consistent with capacity requirements can be met without an existing concurrency determination from the Fish and Wildlife Service on a concrete plan. That's got to be done. It's just simply a prerequisite for this type of proceeding under these circumstances. Usually, you don't have those types of restrictions, but in this case, we do. Similarly, the size and the site characteristics, item H under the code, says that the size, shape, location, and topography must appear adequate to accommodate the proposed use, including intensity, open space, and other considerations. Those questions can't be addressed with regard to the primary consideration for this parcel, which is conservation, until the Fish and Wildlife Service has passed upon a plan that they can say, it's going to be here, it's going to have so many cars, it's going to have these requirements, the intensity is going to be such and so, whatever it is. None of that we know. Staff tells us, don't worry, we're going to handle that all in site development review. Well, no, and that's not the requirement. The requirement is to show those things to you good people, so you can say, yes, we're satisfied that on the evidence presented, we can say that exists in this application. It simply doesn't. And I ask you to acknowledge and reflect on what you have been provided, that it does not have those requirements and you cannot find them. Similarly, with regard to the use requirements, it has to comply with any additional conditional use requirements. The predominant one is, of course, as the Fish and Wildlife in the letter that is submitted in evidence has told you, is primary. Conservation. Everything that is being looked at here has got to be, first of all, checked off. How is this going to affect the conservation element? How is it? If you look at the application, the word conservation is virtually absent. It doesn't speak to those questions in this application. It says we'll do that later. Well, doing it later is not adequate when you have something that is the primary consideration for this parcel as a matter of law, as a condition of its purchase, that you must address in order to meet those requirements. And while I'm certain that the county can do those things and do the necessary legwork with the Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with a concrete plan that they can evaluate, render determinations on, and come back and present to you on the record that you have, you simply can't do that. You do not have the evidence. You cannot make those findings. And we're, I think, wasting time and effort and public resources to go forward with this when we would simply have to continue our objections in other settings, which makes no sense. If they want to do it and do it right, they can do the work. County Commission's behind them. They can clearly do the concurrency that's required in order to present a proper application. They haven't done that here. And I would ask that you insist that treat the county like any other applicant. When they have concurrent requirements, and those concurrent requirements have to be shown in order to establish their ability to proceed under the code, make them comply with the code. Thank you.
Board members, any questions of the council? Staff, any questions? Applicant, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Will Dunaway, representing Seafair, law firm Clark Partington. Mr. Chairman, if I could, I want to make clear as to what evidence has already been presented and just review that, and to affirm that there is no additional evidence to be presented by the applicant. As I understand it, the board has been presented and has accepted into evidence the staff report, of which was publicly available prior to this meeting. It has additionally accepted into evidence a one-page minutes from the October meeting of the Board of County Commissioners directing this action, and it has admitted two documents. One was Mr. Tim Day's presentation at that same board meeting, the package of which I believe you were provided with copies of, and those were options to develop Perdido Key access, public access on Perdido Key. And then I believe the last piece of evidence that has been presented and accepted into evidence is the 3-page document, which was email correspondence between Mr. Day and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Is there any additional evidence that has been presented beyond the testimony, of course, that we heard from those who were sworn? The email was the last, right, Mr. Day?
We did not get the PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have actually made copies of those if you'd like, or, oh, you have copies.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Did y'all accept that?
I don't think we accepted that as evidence.
Okay, well.
But we did not get a copy. I just wanted to make that correction.
Okay. So it has not been accepted into evidence.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that
Discussed.
we accept the PowerPoint presentation.
Second.
We have a motion by Michael and a second by Bill that we accept into evidence the documents regarding the emails. PowerPoint, sorry. Those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the board, while you're reviewing, I'll move forward and continue. I am going to reference it, and so we'll be able to go over it together. As Mr. Mead has already stated, and I concur with him, the county as the applicant here is an unusual situation, but not unprecedented. But nevertheless, it is both the applicant and the staff review. In that regard, they have failed to comply with the grant requirements for this parcel, and they have failed to show compliance with the requirements of the Land Development Code for this conditional use request to develop this parcel as a parking lot with public bathing facility. The conditional use conditions that you've heard are very clearly set forth in the Land Development Code at Section 2-6.4. They're specific conditions that the applicant must prove before a conditional use can be granted. And despite the county's staff report purporting to meet those criteria, the criteria or those conditions simply have not been met based on the evidence that you have before you. And the failures of that I want to review with you now. It is very clear that the applicant has the burden of presenting competent, substantial evidence to establish each of the conditions. Not a majority of them, but each of them. The first one being the general compatibility that Mr. Mead spoke to. That is that the proposed use can be conducted and operated in a manner that is compatible with adjacent properties and other properties in the immediate area. The county has simply failed to present any plan that will meet this condition. The county's not just any applicant in this case. They are, in fact, the instrument of government. They are the people's representative here. As such, the public plans that guide the development of public and private lands that are approved by the county, the Board of County Commissioners, should guide, must guide, in fact, the county as it sets out to develop this property, just as it would a private developer. In this case, those plans are the comprehensive plan, the Land Development Code, and the Perdido Key Master Plan, which I'll refer to further as the master plan. The master plan was adopted, as you heard Ms. Rogers tell you, by the Escambia County Board of County Commissioners on June the 2nd of 2016. The Perdido Key Master Plan is based on public input, planning initiatives, existing development, physical and environmental characteristics, and social and economic conditions. It's a comprehensive document that guides the development and future growth of the community. It includes analysis, recommendations, and proposals for housing, transportation, facilities, land use, and economic development. The master plan's purpose is to help decision makers, i.e. you, maintain a balance between protection and conservation and growth and development. The information contained in the plan is intended to guide the decisions related to public and private use of the lands and public facilities in a manner that is compatible with the land's character and its adaptability, thus promoting good stewardship and resources. And that's simply quoting from the master plan itself. Since the master plan was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, it tells the public and this board what patterns of development the BCC desires on Perdido Key. Specifically, it does not call for random beach accesses with newly developed surface parking lots. Instead, it calls for structured parking on the north side of Perdido Key Drive with walkable access to existing public parks and state-owned beaches. It specifically calls for less surface parking and beach access that requires more traffic, which is what a surface parking lot promotes, more traffic. Furthermore, the county has a requirement to preserve this particular parcel as part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Grant. You've heard a lot about that here in the testimony that has been presented to you. The parcel was purchased with federal monies. You heard a figure of about 3/4 of the money was federal money for the federally protected habitat conservation. You've seen on the staff report the critical habitat map, both before and as it exists now. That habitat has been doing its purpose for the last years as county owned. It has been providing the critical habitat for a protected species. It is, the requirement is very clear, and that is one of the reasons that it was important for you to have access to the staff report, Mr. Day. Of course, you know Mr. Day is a Natural Resources Management Department here at the county, and if you have that piece of evidence before you, I'd like for you to invite your attention to some of the information that Mr. Day pointed out to the Board of County Commissioners as he talked about the public access here. He talks about, look on the, about the 4th page, he talks about the challenges for moving forward on this particular project. He mentions in those challenges, and they're on the right side, and the first one is it's outside the preferred area for public access in the Perdido Key Master Plan. So he's telling the Board of Commissioners that it doesn't follow their plan. Interestingly, the second bullet is it is you. It says you, if you move forward with this, will have to prove a conditional use. That was presented to the Board of County Commissioners as a challenge. It's presented here to you today as a foregone, straightforward conclusion. And obviously, there's a disconnect there. It has as the third option the fact that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has concerns. That was presented. It has the concern of access for emergency management, which reduces the area for available parking. Again, you've heard testimony that what one of the commissioners at least was trying to do was trying to leverage this property to get better access for the public in some better location, so that this property, because it was constrained as it is because of the federal grant and the federal monies for its particular primary purpose as protection for habitat, it was not the best suited area for public access. And you've heard, obviously, neighboring concerns. We're standing here before you, and construction and design funding. You've heard information, or there's evidence presented that there may or may not be monies for this. These were the challenges that the applicant itself presented to its, essentially, board of directors, the county commission. And yet they move forward here today indicating that everything has been taken care of. Everything has not been taken care of, board members. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife questioned the very premise of development at all on this parcel. The primary purpose for the purchase, as has been stated, was for federally protected species conservation and habitat. This was in keeping with the county's habitat conservation plan for the Perdido Key beach mouse. In fact, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife stated that, and I quote, "Any public use of this parcel would have to be consistent with the original intent of the grant, which is PKBM conservation." That's in the email that you have, the correspondence between Mr. Day and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. This is why the county site plan constrains the development to the easternmost side, as you saw. But of course, if you read Ms. Yankis's email, you'll say, well, that's better than the other option, which was taking it all and cutting off the beach mice access to the, as you heard me tell you, additional conservation lands north of 98. While it's better than that, it's not in conformity with the request of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Instead, read the email. They say that they would be interested in discussing an option to transfer the development footprint of this Sundown parcel. And I just want to make clear I think the board understands, some members of the public did not. I represent Seafair, I do not represent Sundowner. Sundowner has the access way that's been referred to that's next to the restaurant. But nevertheless, they said that we would be interested in looking to transfer that from the Sundowner parcel, that's this parcel, to that of less sensitive lands, thus not triggering the HCP permit requirement. As you heard Mr. Day state, he will have to issue himself a permit to be able to do this. Now, as Ms. Rigby knows, when we normally develop property, of course, we're the applicant and we're going to the county. The county, we're having to explain and we're getting permits. But in this case, Mr. Day is working and there will have to be a county permit that he has to issue himself. Well, certainly I'm confident that he can do that. But the point is that Fish and Wildlife is trying to find a solution by which you can have public access for the beach and still maintain this critical habitat. And that, of course, is what one of the commissioners were doing and had been doing to try and work this for the benefit of the public. Your board, this board, should deny this conditional use request on this fact alone, because it's contrary to the master plan and the Habitat Conservation Plan. And the county has presented no plan that can reasonably be expected to show that there's compatibility. In fact, they've told you that those other issues will be taken care of in a further plan. So you should deny it on that fact alone. But fortunately, for those of us who are opposing this, there are multiple other criteria. The second one is facilities and services. Here it says the public facilities and services, especially those with adopted level of service, will be available and will provide adequate capacity to serve the proposed use consistent with the capacity requirements. Well, as discussed above, again, you should deny this because they presented you no evidence that the proposed construction will adequately service or be adequately serviced by public facilities. Just the opposite. The county's own planning documents, together with the requirements of the grant monies used to purchase, have not been met. So therefore, there's no consistency with any approved plans because there are no plans that have yet been approved. Only a staff report that makes conclusory statements that they are approved. The third criteria, on-site circulation. Ingress and egress from the site and its structures will be sufficient, particularly regarding vehicles and pedestrian safety and convenience, effective traffic flow and control, on-site parking, loading, and emergency vehicle access. Here, again, the county's on-site plan review discusses the limitations for access for emergency vehicles and attempts to mitigate this by reducing the very parking that the county is saying is driving the plan for this development. Again, this is completely contrary to the Perdido Key Master Plan, which again, as I've stated, does not call for random beach accesses on surface parking lots in the federally procured habitat conservation parcel. Instead, it specifically states that additional parking for beach access ought to be in structured parking, and there is no evidence that the county has made any attempt, or the applicant here, the county, has made any attempt to meet this requirement. The fourth, nuisance and hazards. The scale, intensity, and operation of the use will not generate unreasonable noise, glare, dust, smoke, odor, vibration, electrical interference, or other nuisance or hazards for adjoining property and other properties in the immediate area. Again, the county stated that because this is a passive recreation site, the intensity of uses and effect on surrounding properties will be limited. But this ignores the very certain fact that building a new surface parking lot on critical Perdido Key beach mice habitat is not a passive use. Instead, it's a very active use, which will have the intended purpose of inviting the public to bring their vehicles, increase the use of this habitat conservation parcel inconsistent with its purpose. And no evidence beyond a simple assertion was presented to you in evidence to demonstrate compliance with this criteria, important criteria. 5E, solid waste. All on-site solid waste containers will be appropriately located for functional access, limited on-site visibility, and minimal odor and/or nuisance impacts. The county stated in the staff report the only evidence to you on this particular criteria that they will maintain solid waste service in the same manner as with other public beach access sites on Perdido Key. However, this ignores the very real fact that this, as we have heard all morning, is not like every other public beach access site on Perdido Key. In fact, it is unique because there exists no other such county-owned parcel purchased with federal money for the particular purpose of beach mice habitat that the county is seeking to pave for a public parking. By its very purpose, the parcel cannot be treated like every other public beach access. As such, the county has failed to present you evidence on this important criteria. F, screening and buffering. Where not otherwise required by the Land Development Code, screening and buffering will be provided if appropriate to the proposed use and site. The county acknowledges that screening and buffering for the parking lot, the solid waste dumpsters, and any other facilities will be limited by the environmental constraints on site. However, instead of addressing those limitations, the county simply states, and I quote from the report, the passive recreational use and limited scope will alleviate the buffering needs. While it is convenient that the applicant is the county, and this statement in support of that is helpful to their cause, but it's not evidence of compliance with this required criteria, and therefore another reason for you to deny this request. G, signs and lighting. All exterior signs and lighting, whether approved, whether attached or freestanding, will be compatible and compatible with adjoining properties and other properties in the immediate area, especially regarding glare and traffic safety. Here, the county states that informational and directional signage will be provided as necessary and no lighting is proposed. If the county is actually going to spend public monies to develop and pave and create a public parking lot, put in solid waste dumpsters and other facilities for public beach access, and install no lighting, then this is the worst public facility ever proposed. Because common sense indicates that beach access and going to the beach at sunset is a magical time, right? You go to the beach for the magical sunset. And so post-sunset, the post-sunset trip, back up the walk, across the parking lot, into a car, and out onto a busy street with no lighting is nonsensical. Not presenting evidence of a compliant lighting plan is fatal, and this board should find that no compliance with this criteria has been met and denied for that request. We go on to H, site characteristics. Mr. Mead addressed this briefly. I state for you the requirement. The size, shape, location, and topography of the site appear adequate to accommodate the proposed use, including setbacks, intensity, bulk height, open space, and aesthetic considerations. The county states in their report, the only evidence presented to you on this particular criteria is that the parcel size and topography are appropriate for the use as proposed. Then look, if you would, I invite your attention to their report, because in the very next sentence, the staff report states, and I quote, "Site constraints will limit the proposed use to half of the previously developed footprint on the parcel." You've already heard that the previous development on this parcel was a condo that was destroyed by Ivan. Over the years ensuing, that has returned to the habitat that it was intended for and for which this property was purchased for. The burden of proof lies with the applicant to prove each of these statements, each of the criteria has been met. Merely stating that it complies with it and then giving a second sentence that says it is constrained, the actual use is in fact constrained, does not meet that burden of proof. And finally, board members, the final criteria that must be met, which is in this case the most difficult for the applicant, is the use requirement. Is the proposed use, does it comply with additional conditional use requirements and the applicable zoning district use and other provisions of the Land Development Code? Again, if you consider this ninth and final condition, consider how many times the staff has presented a review of an applicant's request before this board. Many of you have sat on this board for years. You know the detail that staff provides an applicant's package. You know that in relationship to the last one I stood before you going through. Very intense, detailed review of each of these criteria. But then, board members, consider how in this case, when the county is the applicant, that attention to detail appears to be absent. In response to this final but critical condition, the county simply states, quote, "Additional requirements regarding access on site and environmental issues may be imposed during the site plan review process," close quote. Now, board members, that last sentence is worth my repeating. Quote, "Additional requirements regarding access on site and environmental issues may be imposed during the site plan review process." Board members, you should be seeing red flags waving and telling you to stop and examine the facts. These additional requirements are not waiting to possibly be imposed later. They are already imposed by the master plan, the federal grant, and the habitat conservation plan. This applicant is well aware of the extent of these requirements, and they have been unpersuasive in proving to this board that the impact of those requirements on this application are in compliance with this critical condition. Members, you know what the standard is for approval. The standard comes to us in Urban. The applicant is responsible for carrying the burden on each of the criteria. And only if they meet their burden on establishing that all of the criteria, all of them, and I submit to you in this case, not a single one of them has been met, but in the event that you think so, then the burden shifts to those who are opposing it. Normally, it would be in the case of staff, but that's reversed, to show that this would be adverse to the public. You heard the testimony of the evidence here before you. You heard it stated that not following the county's own plans, taking this federally protected conservation area and granting a conditional use on this level of detail, i.e. lack of detail, would in fact be adverse to the public. And now, the issue that has just been the whole point behind this, and that is this big political hot potato thrust in your arena for this particular conditional use. It's actually not fair to you. And I submit to you that you don't need to worry about the Board of County Commissioners not getting their way by approving this process. Because if they had actually wanted to handle this difficult political decision, they would have instead directed staff to do what you heard the several citizens talk to you on the record about, and that is they would have gone and done a land use change. The possibility exists, and in fact, if they voted 3-1, which is what your evidence shows you, the vote was 3-1 with one commissioner being out. 3 votes is all it takes to change the zoning or to change the future land use in this county. And there is a Perdido key, both recreational and conservation zoning district. Board members, this is high-density residential, which they are asking you for a conditional use on. Now, I don't think the county's going to build a condo on it. I don't think they could build a condo on it. I don't think that's where they're going. I'm just simply saying, why are you being asked to approve a conditional use for a park in a high-density residential zoning district when the county commissioners know and have the staff to go change the zoning if they want a public park? You also heard from one of the applicants tell you, and it is absolutely true, that the conditional use you're being asked is for a public access. No mention of conservation. And yet you know from the facts that conservation is the primary purpose. And if there's 2 conditional uses, you have to address it specifically. And you have to maintain and have the conditions. That's what a conditional use is. You, as the board, have to tell the applicant what conditions you're going to put on the use of the property. You don't know what those are because the staff, the applicant in this case, hadn't told you. Because they don't know, because they haven't done the plan, and they don't have the permission of the Fish and Wildlife. Differently than normally, when we would say, you don't have to wait to go get the wetlands permit, as Ms. Ruby said. That would be something, and you would go on ahead and approve, and then we'd go get those permits. That's not the case here, because the very purchase of the property required the management plan. The management plan hasn't been done, and yet they're asking for the conditional use. You have 2 options. Approve it, and then it goes up to a circuit court and it's out of the BCC's hands. Or deny it and put it back where it needs to be, and that's in front of the Board of County Commissioners. We'd ask that you choose the latter. Deny it, send it back to the Board of County Commissioners. If they want a public access park on this sensitive habitat conservation area, let them do it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, do we get to close as well, but unlimited time?
The applicant gets to close.
That would be with the people.
Thank you, Tim Day, once again. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of the points. Once again, the discussion about the management plan. The email that was provided to you did show that there was a preference towards the plan that you've seen today if total preservation is not an option. The board, at their last meeting, provided us the guidance that they would like to go ahead. So, in my opinion, that's taking it off the table. Intensity. Our draft site plan is suggesting approximately 22 parking spaces. It is a former home of a 26-unit condo. We're proposing ultimately that there's less families utilizing this beach than what historically has or had Sundown rebuilt, and they had a development order prior to selling to us. But they were going to put back that 26 units, so this is still a less intense utilization than what was proposed prior. Per the grant, when we submitted it, the Section 6 grant we've been talking about, what was proposed by the county at that time was up to, or approximately, 0.8 acres that would be converted into public use for public access. What's being proposed through guidance from the board is half of that, approximately 0.4 acres. So the county is voluntarily reducing the intensity. Kind of the discussion, we talked about, this site being unique in terms of beach mouse habitat. It is not. All of our county beach accesses have beach mouse critical habitat on them. On those sites, with the exception of health and safety lighting at the restroom itself, we do not provide lighting at any of our public access facilities. This actually would be treated in a very similar fashion to how we treat all of our existing facilities that is consistent with the Habitat Conservation Plan. A small point that I'd also like to bring up, there's been some discussion on change of zoning out on the Key. And part of the reason we're here is because it is allowed as a conditional use. As the administrator for the Perdida Key Habitat Conservation Plan, on the Key, I discourage rezonings of all types, whether it be upzoning or downzoning, because permits on the Key are allocated based on zoning. And so the HCP kind of, if you think of it this way, if we fixed in time what we anticipated for uses and intensities across the entirety of the Key, our zoning map gives a good indication of that. And so our conservation measures and our plans for the mouse to remain in the wild in perpetuity are based on what our existing zoning map is. And so it's not that, and once again, zonings are not prohibited, but as a matter of course, just as the administrator, I need to object to them. And the way that I'll give you an example is when I issue a permit, there are so many acres per zoning category that are allocated. So if I run out of the ability to permit in one zoning category and a savvy developer realizes, well, I could do something slightly different in this zoning category that has some take available, they would simply seek to change their zoning to get this other allocation. Unfortunately, what that would do is it would ultimately throw the whole program out of whack, because when we assign take per zoning category, it was fixed in time and what the map looked like. So with that, I'd like to let Drew address.
Thank you, sir.
Sure. So I'm here to talk about the conditional use, just the conditional use. I know we've been all over the place today. A couple things that need to be cleaned up for the record. So intent, when you're talking uses, intensity, and the effects from intensity, that goes both ways. What is proposed right now is a 22 odd space passive recreation park. Condo to the east, large condo to the east, quite a bit more intense than a passive recreation park. Condo to the north, across the road, which then accesses this waterfront, again, much more intense. I think we all understand the restaurant to the west, zone commercial out there, is obviously much more intense use and has more issues with being compatible with a passive recreation area. Another point that's been touched on repeatedly is the Perdido Key Master Plan. Perdido Key Master Plan, it does call for more public beach access. It does not, however, restrict beach access to the town center overlay. Town center overlay is along River Road there, from the bend on back, or on Perdido Key Drive, from the bend on down to where River Road connects. In that area under that overlay, absolutely, we really need more beach access there. Once again, it's not the only place that beach access can be. In fact, the nearest point of the master plan overlay is 2.6 miles away from this location. It doesn't restrict this being beach access. This is an unusual one with that Fish and Wildlife layer. The county is coming to the Board of Adjustment first. Others do this also. You get that chicken or the egg. We go and get all our full engineering, then come for the land use and be turned down, or do you come here and get the land use approved, possibly with conditions imposed by this board, and then engineer around that? So it is an awkward situation. I will constantly contend it's not prohibited by the master plan. This is 2.6 miles away. We need to get the focus back here. What this is a conditional use request. A lot of things are wrapped around this issue, I think we all know. But from a staff standpoint, hey, we take them as they arrive, and this is just strictly a conditional use request.
Board members, any questions of the applicant? Any questions of staff? The chair will now entertain a motion regarding this item. In your motion, please state whether or not you adopt the staff's findings of fact. If for any reason you do not accept staff's findings of fact, please go through all the criteria and address each one specifically as to why you do not concur with staff's findings. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I thought perhaps we might discuss it a little bit before we...
Sure.
I'd just like to say, we've heard a lot of testimony here today, and I know that what we as the board want to do is to consider a narrow technical issue of whether or not there is competent and substantial evidence presented that would support the applicant's position to grant the continued conditional use. And we've heard a lot of other, what I would call public policy issues being brought into this, but I just want our discussions, so for the purposes of the record, I would hope to be limited to that technical question as to whether or not there's evidence to support or deny of this conditional use.
Are you looking for an opinion on whether we think there's evidence to support it?
Yes, we've heard some very excellent advocacy by Mr. Meade and others, and while the counsel for the opposition makes an excellent argument, to my mind, it was simply argument. It would have perhaps been a different decision-making process for me if there were experts on their side to rebut the county's position. And as I said, I heard it really was zealous and excellent arguments, but in my mind, it was simply argument, which a good lawyers are supposed to do for their client, and certainly that was the case here. But I didn't hear any expert testimony that would dispute what the applicant presented.
Well, also in the past, we've approved conditional uses that have to pass the review process. And we know in this case that they're still going to have to pass the review process. Want to stop the project. I feel like staff has given a good enough argument to keep it moving forward. And I did watch the county commission, and they are adamant about getting this moved. And I would think if we approve the conditional use, provided it passes the review process, then that gives them the leeway to keep going on this. I think they're going to keep going on it anyway. But that's just me.
All in favor?
My only concern, and I don't know if I've got the answer that I've been looking for, which Mr. Dunaway had brought up, is the rezoning process. Why not, if this is conservation property and recreation, why not rezone it? Why not make it, a definite, not just a conditional use? That's the only concern that I have, I guess, about this whole thing. I do believe that it's both conservation and access, recreational. Mr. Jones, I know that Tim Day touched on it briefly, and I think I kind of understand the premise that he was explaining. But what we're taking away is a parcel that is currently zoned HDR, but yet we're not rezoning it to a conservation or to a recreational type use. By not doing that, by just requesting a conditional use, what is it that we are missing here? Why?
Ms. Bigby.
What's the future hold for this site?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. This, if the BOA decides to grant this conditional use approval, that would be the use designated for this property. It would be this use designated for this property. Because this is allowed by the Land Development Code for a conditional use approval, that's the first option. And that's what this board is doing, based upon what Mr. Tim stated for the rezoning. If that was the option, the planning board and the staff and the BCC, they definitely would consider him as being the subject matter of the HCP very, very strongly. So, but this HDR, that's the first, when it is listed here, any applicant, they can say we want to follow the process as laid out by the Land Development Code, which is a conditional use, which it does allow for public parks as conditional use approval. And this is what this is, and this is why this option, that's why the code is proceeding in this matter, so that as any applicant, if a rezone is not necessary, no applicant will just get a rezone just because there are so many other options. But this, the first, is available, and this is why the staff and this is why the code allows for this. But this use will be set in stone.
When you say set in stone, do you mean provided that the county still owns that parcel?
Yes, and I'm quite. It's a public use.
Right.
Yes, and I cannot speak for the county in absolutes.
Right.
But I'm quite certain that it would be to change it from that. It'll be an uphill battle, just like it is to for this to get to this point, so.
Right, my concern, I guess, that I'm headed to is, and we don't know what the future holds, but when we have done conditional uses on many different parcels in the past, because this deals with the wildlife issue, if in the future this parcel were to be sold,
It couldn't.
where does that put us?
I will have to let Mr. say, I don't think he can respond to that question today.
It's, kind of what Forrest said, of course, it's hard to never say never. In this grant, we received about $2.25 million from the feds, $750,000 was put up in local option sales tax. If there was some scenario in which we sold it, which is highly unlikely because land acquisition is a goal in the HCP, and this was the number 3 target by U.S. Fish, we would actually have to get a measure of permissions plus pay back the federal government the monies that were invested by the federal government. So, although I can never say never, I would say it's highly unlikely that we would go through a process in which we'd be repaying the federal government back.
Right.
And, once again, this was prioritized because of the Habitat Conservation Plan as an important holding, in particular to the dune feature on the north side of the property. I would just suggest it would be a very challenging process to get, to coordinate with U.S. Fish to somehow release it and
Okay, so
ultimately
they
make that
too
habitat
have an interest, if you will, and that was my concern is, 10 years from now, the county, sells it, where does that leave Fish and Wildlife, who has, put up this money and y'all worked with, I mean.
And so that's where it goes back to getting the approved management plan for how we're going to treat the property. But unlike it's with any property acquired with grants, there's strings attached to make sure that you continue to hold it.
Okay.
So once again, I'll never say never, but amazingly unlikely that there would be a board that would move forward and sell off the parcel.
Any further comments by any board member? Any questions of anybody?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I'd say is we've heard excellent argument on the other side of the question and in opposition, but we've not heard any expert testimony to support the argument. And for that reason, I would move that we would support the conditional use.
We have a motion to accept
Second.
those findings. The motion was made by Michael and seconded by Bill. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Passes unanimously.
God, it was like watching paint dry.
It was.
Win-win for the home.
What did you think about those proceedings?
Mr. Chairman, it was kind of a waste of the public's time to get to a point where, just like anybody.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
We do have a case, the meeting will be on the 19th. It's a conditional use.
First, they got a report to develop it.
It's on the 19th. And then we'll be getting a hold of y'all as far as trying to reschedule the appeal issue. Definitely January.
Good job.
Doing good. How you doing?
Doing well.
Good seeing you. Hello. How you doing?
I'm Charles. This is Annie.
How you doing, Annie? Good to meet you.
Where's your outfit? Where are you located?
I am located. Well, I got a farm over on Bower Road.
Oh, good.
Right there by the sports complex, and then I got
So if I turn the right to the sports complex, you're in there someplace?
I'm actually 60 feet from the two furthest, the two southest or most southern baseball fields.
Oh, very cool. You get baseballs?
Actually, we probably entertain them more than they entertain us.
I see.
We got a boxing ring right out there.
Oh, very cool. Boxing.
So matter of fact, I got a video of my daughter sparring out there.